Someday somebody will hear me. My name is Andrew Windy Boy. I'm a Chippewa Cree. I did 2 boarding schools, one in Wapton Indian School in Wapton, North Dakota. There's Flandreau Indian School in Flandreau, South Dakota. Mid-60s to early 70s took me to the boarding school where I wasn't allowed to talk my native tongue or practice my native ways. They took me away from all of that and punished me for talking that. It was my first language. I didn't know any other language. So whenever I talk, it came out. Cree would come out, and whenever I talk, I get hit. I got hit so much I lost my tongue. I lost my native tongue. The only thing I remember was my Indian name, which is Xenukihu, means old man eagle.
Mm. Mm.
Good everything.
Good everything. What moved you to have us hear that, Elder? First thing this morning.
First of all, this happened in the 60s. You and I were born in the 60s.
Yeah.
And this was happening in the United States of America. And I don't remember conversations. I don't remember this being in the schools. I don't remember it being on television. I don't remember anyone talking about it. I also thought about our ancestors who came here with multiple languages on their tongues and having that beaten out of them. You know, that scene in Roots, I think, was very tame, from Kunta Kinte to Toby. But what was lost, and this man now is in his 70s, I'm sure. And it's as painful as if it happened yesterday. And what I see in the crying is also the loss of his culture, of his language. And today across campuses, young people are out protesting still on several campuses, those that didn't cut deals. And they're not protesting for themselves. They're protesting for people who can't protest for themselves. But they are protesting for themselves because but for you standing up for others, it could easily happen to you, whether we're talking about the Irish who had their entire food supply sent overseas. And then when a famine hit, they still, when the Queen died, they were, river dancing, not just because of that, but because they have memory. And part of In Class with Carr, I feel, has been the reclamation of memory, not just for African people, but period, for humanity. And if we don't have compassion or the capacity to see wrong anywhere, or as King would say, injustice anywhere is injustice everywhere, this, as you said, this experiment will probably go away. But this is just one domino. America falls, everything. So I think we must press it to become a more perfect union. We can't quit and get fatigued and frustrated and wait for the cavalry to come rescue us. We are the cavalry.
So the future of humanity depends on the survival of America.
No, I don't believe that.
Neither do I.
No, I don't believe that. I don't believe that. You just said something, but we live here. We got an American passport, and things are until they aren't. I'm not super happy with change, but change is how things happen. I went for a walk this morning, and I'm like, oh, the trees, I have some dogwoods, and they go through this thing where they flower, and then the flowers fall, and then the green comes, and then there's other berry things later on in the season, and then that falls, and then it's barren, and then you think nothing's coming, and then something comes. That's
It's
the
nature of things.
And I think we've artificially tried to make that not happen anymore, but
exactly
it's going to happen. Okay.
And that's what they were trying to do with that elder. they were artificially trying to make something happen. That's what they did in historic Palestine. They were artificially trying to make something happen. And the thing about it is, when you do things with bad intention or good intention, there are consequences. And the heavy dose of Lysol, intellectual cultural Lysol, that has always been sprayed over this funky settler state, kind of immune to it now. And so what happens when the recovery of memory requires a reckoning? It's kind of cute that we continue to refer to 2020 as a reckoning. It wasn't a reckoning, because a reckoning would have resulted in not only an accounting, but well, what did they call it in South Africa, which they were able to avert? Truth and reconciliation. Truth precedes reconciliation. And they dodged the bullets in 2020, as you've been talking about since 2020, consistently. The disappearance of the little boutique gestures toward please don't burn our country down, called diversity, equity, and inclusion, because that's all it is a safety valve. It's not an attempt to change the society. But even that's been rolled up. Why? Oh, they're not going to burn it? Fine. Give me those $3 back. Or you keep the $3, but that's the last $3 you'll get until the next time. These young people on these college campuses, isn't it interesting? I mean, listening to you this week and listening to everybody else and reading and sitting and thinking and spending some time on Wednesday night with the young people who have a tent at Howard on the Upper Quadrangle, and listening to the politics as a historically Black college grapples with not wanting to come out as oppressive out of fear and wanting to lean into the reputation of Black colleges being places where these kind of things are discussed. You know, just listening to all that and thinking about the differences that are being revealed. City College, you charge them differently than you do to Columbia students. Shout out to Eric Adams, a remarkable politician in the sense that he is risking it all for his masters. He's risking it all. I got to give a brother credit for that. He doesn't go lightweight. He goes in hard. Shout out to Al Sharpton, who wants to stay on television, and so says something so absurd that even the daughter of one of the great colonial empire building settler colony project pursuing figures of the 20th century said, oh no, don't compare it to anytime you can get Mika.
I said, wait a minute, hold up, wait a minute. Nobody required that of you, sir.
Well, he required it of himself. I mean, after all, he's listening to his master's voice.
This is how sick this is. This is how sick it is that you believe that is the way that you maintain. Nobody requires that of you.
Nobody requires. I mean, you know, you're not a complete and utterly weightless platform brayer like young brother Acho, who is just determined to get 3 pennies off of his master's table. But so your words have a little bit of weight, Al, but you don't realize that you came into the social structure scene as a caricature. And the only thing you had was a nominal sense of credibility because you were in the streets with the people. But now that you have said that these college students are the equivalent of the white nationalists who literally tried to overthrow the government, you now, you know, it is funny, isn't it? I mean, it's funny in the sense that, you know, there's a bright line being drawn, and Negroes seem to think that somehow they can negotiate on both sides of the bright line, and they're finding themselves on the wrong side of the bright line. Shout out to Stephen A. Smith. It's really quite remarkable. You see, and you can't come back from it. Or maybe you can in America because amnesia is the, you know.
Yeah, I was going to say you can't come back from it because the levers of power are going to always provide a safe place. So maybe the calculation is correct.
Oh, it's correct in that sense.
Yeah,
it's absolutely correct in that sense. But what you played is, it does raise so many questions. What do we do when memory recovery then requires an accounting and a reckoning? These college students are, and you know, I thought about you a lot this week, Prof. I mean always, but I mean especially this week, as a a craftsperson, as a journalist, as a teacher of journalism, I'm quite proud of those students at WCKX at Columbia and the writers for the Daily Pennsylvanian, and they're showing journalism. I'm just listening to these young people. They crashed their website. Everybody listening to them. CNN, ain't nobody trying to listen to Donna Bash or Abby Phillip. MSNBC, you're worthless. Matt Al, where's your Kiki? Oh, that's all night. But these kids, you know what I'm saying? And I love how they're kids, right? Because they're coming on the air and they're saying things like, excuse me, I don't want to break up, but the police are coming in. Excuse me, we got. And then the one little guy. I say little guy. One young guy. Everything he says at the end of the sentence, it's and some such and things of that nature. And the kind of things you hear young people say. But in between is this kind of. I know y'all got to be scared as hell. These punk ass cops out here who would never hit anybody except a defenseless person out here with every kind of riot gear. They just looking forward to taking out on you kids. And you're still not moving from across the street. I'm listening to these kids like, look at y'all. I see you, student journalists. You're exposing these people who are getting paid millions of dollars to push propaganda. I don't know. What do you think about that? Because you're a teacher of what have you been observing?
I love it. I sat in a newsroom at the New York Daily News, 104%, Black people 4%, sat across from Marsha Kramer, who would have her feet up on the desk, and people would be smoking cigarettes. So people had typewriters when I was in the newsroom. I just want to let you know how long ago that was. And as a 21-year-old, had no depth or perspective, but understood Central Park 5, that something was wrong with my paper's coverage. I remember the wilding headlines. And I was like, spent some time with Sharon Yusef Salam's mom, and she was adamant that her son was innocent, and I was powerless to make that case. And then I realized in that moment, the responsibility of somebody with a pen at that point was so much greater than I could even imagine. I think about also, the Vietnam protests. I think about the riots of the 60s while we were babies. And that was the emergence of Black journalists. The Black journalists that sued the Daily News for racism, 4 of them, it was 20, and then it was 10, and then everyone kept getting their little payoffs. Shout out to Bob Herbert and others who fell away from the lawsuit, and then there was the 4. And because of the 4, I was able to have a seat at the table because they risked it all, because they recognized that when you couldn't go into neighborhoods, you had to go find Black people to go into the neighborhoods to have these conversations, right? So, journalism has always been in the streets, whether we're talking about the Arab Spring, that emerged on Twitter, that gave Twitter its real power and foundation. And now it's TikTok. We're going to have this conversation too, probably in the coming days as they look to ban it. But the people will always tell the truth, whether it's the griots in our, ancient culture, or the folk on plantations that delivered messages through quilts. We've always figured out how to tell the people who needed to know the things. Before there was an internet, we found out some things and where to show up. So this is a moment. This is an inflection point. I am supremely proud of how the young people are not turning away, but that's always been the case, whether we're talking about the civil rights movements, young people, Black Panther Party, young people, college students. So this is our tradition.
It's our tradition.
So the question is, who's going to get the check, though?
What you mean?
Who's going to get the check to walk away?
Whether none of them walk away, the check is fighting fiercely.
Yeah,
the check is fighting fiercely, and I for one embrace it, because this isn't going to get resolved without some serious engagement. I won't call it necessarily conflict, but there are people in this world who don't care. They don't care about other human beings. They don't care. They're not trying to reach a settlement. So whether it be Dartmouth in particular, Brown University, University of Minnesota, where in order to have the students move away from the physical demonstrations of protest on campus, the leadership agreed to at least put the question of divestment to the trustees, to the foundations, to the boards, that would seem to be a reasonable accommodation. Mm-hmm. But the people screaming bloody murder are the people with the power. And I welcome that. Because in order to break the back of people who don't care, you've got to break the back, the political back, the economic back. And so we have to stop with the language of fantasy. It's a fantasy to think that this is going to be resolved by pretending that things that don't exist pretending that they exist, and pretending that things that exist don't exist. The simple fact of the matter is this is naked raw power. Anytime you can put the police on students
and teachers.
Listen, I mean, when we all saw what happened to the chair of philosophy at Emory University, who's just trying to intervene for her students, who in fact was leaving an academic building and saw what was going on, walked over there. And shout out to all these punk ass cops. Punk ass cops. I'm looking at some of these, and I'm not in the best shape. I got to get out here and get in shape, especially going back to Kemet in August. I'll be ready by August. But I'm looking at some of these cops who probably couldn't run one step without either tearing an ACL or their whole femur shattering, or, overburdened their physical structures, but somehow find the husky strength, especially these Negroes, to come charging across a college quad to tackle a 100-pound old white woman. I mean, shout out to your punk ass thrust. And your little, and shout out to the punk cop at Georgia State University who, because the child had some headgear on, escorted her out of her own graduation. She hadn't opened her mouth. You're punk with your manhood strapped around your chest. Why you got a bulletproof vest on? Ain't nobody checking for you. You're punk. And afterwards, when you go to the bar or go home late at night in the dark and sit in your basement in the drawers and look at the flickering screen of whatever you're watching, I want you to reflect on the fact that you took out an old person or a child, and you feel good about it, Shout out to you. Shout out to the punk-ass cops who tackled Annalise Orlek, a labor historian at Dartmouth, who was one time chair of Jewish studies. And shout out to them, because you are an agent of your master. It's not necessary, but we're going to talk about all that, Prof. I was thinking about it in the context of, as you say, this struggle, and even as, and I'll mention this in passing because it has captured our attention by way of the perpetual distraction that is pop culture. As most Def said many years ago, some beef is big, some beef is small. But what y'all call beef is not beef at all. In fact, he says beef is, among other things, Gaza Strip. He says it in that song Beef. Shout out to Black Dante, Yassine Bey, Most Def. We're not talking about the politics of Drake or Kendrick Lamar at this point, because some beef is big and some beef is small, but what y'all call beef is not beef at all. And so I don't want Drake or Kendrick to catch any more strays than they need to catch, and that's enough of a stray for them to catch this morning, because I just thought about how Marvin Gaye commented, along with his collaborators, when they put together What's Going On, the album. Marvin Gaye said, with the world exploding around me, how am I supposed to keep singing love songs? His brother Frankie, back from the war. Marvin Gaye interacting with him, channeling his brother. Hey, baby, what you no good? I'm just getting back, but you knew I would. War is hell. When will it end? When will people get back together again? He said, are things getting better like the newspaper said? Shout out to the New York Times and CNN with your propaganda. He said, is that true? Besides what I read, ain't got no work, ain't got no job, my friend. Money is tighter than it's ever been. Hey man, I just don't understand what's going on across this land. What's happening, brother? I mean, Marvin Gaye is singing that, and then when he says, are they still going out where we used to dance? Will our ball club win the pennant? Do you think they have a chance? Shout out to Kristen Clark, scored 21 in the pregame game between the Dallas Stars and the Indiana Fever last night for the WNBA. Shout out to the NBA playoffs and whatever is going on, So the brother comes back from Vietnam. His brother say, will our ball club win the pennant? Shout out to the Houston Astros, who can't win no games, and Johnny B. Baker, who's laughing from the West Coast. Shout out to all of that. That's great, but it's all distractions. And then Marvin Gaye says, he puts his brother's words into his song, and he says, and tell me, friend, how in the world have you been? Tell me what's out. I want to know what's in. What's happening, brother? In that concept album, what's going on? 1969. The campuses are in an uproar. I mean, just thinking about how Marvin Gaye's collaborators. I remember a couple of years ago, one of the collaborators on that album made a transition, and it gave me a chance to have a conversation with students about Ronaldo Benson, Obie Benson, one of the original members of the Four Tops out of Detroit, who saw some of the police, these punk ass police of the 1960s, coming to a college campus in the 70s and beating up protesters, and then started beating up protesters in the street. And when you hear that line in What's Going On, mother, everybody thinks we're living wrong. But who are they to judge us? Simply 'cause our hair is long. Obie Benson say, if they will beat up these white hippies, what the hell do you think they'll do to us? So he co-wrote What's Going On, and then he tried to get somebody to record it. Motown, no, Barry Gordy, a little timid. He gave it to Joan Baez. Baez said, nah, I'll pass on that. And then he went to Marvin Gaye. He said, I give you songwriter credit and part of the royalties. Marvin Gaye recorded What's Going On. But it started with Obie Benson of Four Tops. Hey, man, if they will beat up these white kids, what the hell do you think they'll do to us? Oh, my God. What's going on? Marvin Gaye channeling his brother. What's happening, brother? Edwin Starr, war. Good God. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. And in that same 1969, when these things are bubbling down Atlanta way at Morehouse, Samuel L. Jackson and his classmates hold Martin Luther King's father and the rest of the Morehouse Board of Trustees hostage over the war effort and over the birth of Black studies. And what happens? Well, they put him out of school. Sam Jackson is expelled. It's funny, yesterday I saw James Counts Early. James Counts Early, former undersecretary working with the Smithsonian Institution, helped put together the Smithsonian Folk Life Festival for many years. Pan-Africanist global agent for human social change. I mean, really a beautiful brother. Saw James Early yesterday out in front of Sankofa. And he had just come with his friend Andy Shalal, the owner of Busboys and Poets here in D.C., had just come from the small liberated zone that Howard students have created on campus. James Early was one of those Morehouse students that got put out. And he was telling us, he said, one of the things I wanted to communicate with the young people while coming to check on them, which is very important. One of the things I want to communicate with them is that there is a price to be paid when you take a stand, but that guess what? Your life doesn't end. And when you see me, you see somebody who paid a price when I was your age for taking a stand. And I did just fine. It's not going to be the same path that I would have taken. It's not going to be the same ease, and perhaps with which I could have taken it. But the price I paid was absolutely worth it. And you're facing perhaps paying a price, but it's going to be okay. It's very interesting because when you think about Sam Jackson, Sam Jackson is a funny dude, man. I read interviews with Sam Jackson. I heard him talk about that moment. He said, I was with the Black Power people. We getting the guns. We're going to do whatever's necessary. And here I am, then took Martin Luther King daddy and a bunch of other trustees hostage. We wanted more black trustees. We wanted black studies. We wanted the war to end. They drafting us. They're not drafting y'all. We got to stop this. And in that moment, Sam Jackson has said over and over again, he said, I'm in Atlanta. My mama calls and said, we getting you out of there. She said, the FBI came by the house. They said, if you stay in Atlanta over the next year, you might end up dead. So that's when he went to LA for 2 years. This boy is a kid, a college kid, Jackson then comes back to Morehouse. It was 1971, re-enrolls, and changes his major to drama. Sam Jackson said, I decided that I would use drama. I would use theater. I would use acting as my weapon, as my tool for change. And maybe we could communicate to some people, maybe even change some minds. So the fact that Samuel L. Jackson, we know that name, one of the highest grossing box office movie stars in the world. The fact that we know Samuel L. Jackson as that was born because Samuel L. Jackson got put out of Morehouse for doing exactly what those students, actually doing more than what those students at Columbia and CUNY, the students at Howard, the students at Georgia State, the students in the DC encampment, the citywide encampment, the students at Brown and the University of Southern California are doing. So, when we raise this question of where we are right now in the world, one of the things that was percolating in my mind over the arc of the last week or so is this distinction between people and privilege. Between people and privilege. Monday night in office hours, again, every Monday, week after week, month after month, convening in a space that we control that isn't funded by billionaire donors who are now threatening, as I'll talk about in a minute, to take their money from schools because some of them had the nerve to tell students who are protesting, we'll put the question of divestment to a vote. You can stand next to those punk ass cops, billionaires, because you don't care about people. Your shrunken idea of self is so gnarled, so collapsed in on itself that you project outward a type of contempt and vitriol for your fellow human beings that make it impossible for us to look away and make something into a fact that is not a fact. And that not a fact is the fact that you don't care. Well, this is not a space in terms of narrative and the Nubia side that is billionaire subsidized. It's subsidized by the people. And I was grading papers earlier this week. I was downtown DC, kind of posted up reading, and somebody called my name and looked up as a brother coming down K Street. He posted up, saw me sitting there drinking some coffee, grading, and he said he works at one of the think tanks downtown here in DC. And he said, people think Democrat and Republican. He says, don't think about that. Think about power. And when you think about power, the world will change. He said, my job, I see how much money trades hands. I see where influence and power goes. And it doesn't matter whether it's Democrat or Republican. People only respond to power in those offices, in those rooms. Shout out to him. He and his wife, both Nubians, probably here this morning. And so, I won't say any more about that, but except to bring up the point again that when you start talking about the people of the world, I think about the late Jonathan Shell, as you've heard me say many times. Jonathan Shell in his book, The Unconquerable World, who said, there are two powers in the contemporary world at that point. This was in the late 90s, early aughts. And he said, one is nuclear weapons and the other is the people of the world. That's what can irrevocably change everything at any given moment when you have a critical mass. Anytime you see those who perceive themselves as custodians of power, whether it be the mayor of New York City or the president of Columbia University, the president of all these universities, unleash police riots on every campus. I almost feel like they're on some coordinated call, a Zoom call, Microsoft Teams, and every day they collaborate with each other, or they share notes on what they're going to do, but they seem to have reached some consensus. If someone walks on the grass, I want immediately to call the police and tell, how y'all calling the police? Public universities, private universities. You're calling the cops on everyone. I think at that moment you ask the question, what will it take for the people to overwhelm the privileged, particularly when some of the people doing this movement, these actions, taking these actions, are themselves part of the privilege? Again,
Wait, can we just juxtapose that to Mississippi? M-I, crooked letter I.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Something different is happening on that campus.
Ole Miss is never, it stays Ole Miss. Whether it be Ross Barnett, segregation forever at the football game the night before James Meredith, the weekend before James Meredith integrated the University of Mississippi, and the Hillbillies, including a young college cheerleader named Trent Lott, burned up the campus, shot up a bunch of people, and the National Guard had to come in. We talked about the white student body president at the University of Mississippi a few years ago, who became something of a folk hero because of his solidarity with Black students. I was looking at some comments by Misha Cross, the political commentator, good sister, who actually graduated from high school in Mississippi. She ended up at Belmont, my hometown, Nashville, Tennessee. But Amisha said, I had full scholarship to go to Mississippi, Ole Miss, and I wasn't going nowhere near that campus. And to watch the underdeveloped hillbilly bleats of young people who have been enabled, quite frankly, by the hillbilly politicians, the hillbilly horde in Mississippi, so that you can go out there and perform your foolishness in a way that is so blatantly racist that it leaves people no option other than to condemn you, which is unfortunate because, young people do unfortunate things. But you out here jumping on, shouting at, pushing at, and mind you, the press is, the commercial news entertainment media press is torturing itself. It didn't have much credibility to begin with, but it's throwing all credibility away now, grappling for ways to create some kind of both sidism. So they call them counter protesters. These are not counter protesters. These people out here to disrupt things. And so what's happening in Ole Miss is part of a larger thing. Why would you get on a campus and act that crazy? Well, you're in a state where the same week while you're out there yelling at these people who are trying to struggle for our common humanity, regardless of what Dana Bash or anybody else says, they aren't even mentioning the people who were kidnapped on October 7th. My dear, that is a L-I-E. That's a lie. But it's a lie. It was a lie when it bubbled up out of your mouth. It was a lie because your agenda is not to, talk about facts or truth. Your agenda is to push something else. But in the same state of Mississippi this week, we saw that the hillbilly horde and the supermajority of hillbilly horde in the legislature, Senate and House, the deal they tried to create to expand Medicaid fell apart. Everybody poor who needs medical attention in Mississippi ain't Black hillbillies. Some of them your cousins, some of them your family members. Not that you care, you don't care. You want the expansion of Medicaid as long as you can drive those dollars into the companies that fill your coffers, that lobby you in Jackson as you create a special police force to keep you away from the N-words who surround you. You want to expand Medicaid as long as you can get the dollars. Shout out to Brett Favre. You want to expand Medicaid as long as you can control where the money goes. So when you see these young people at Ole Miss acting out, it's because they are looking at their fathers and mothers.
Mm-hmm.
And their fathers and mothers are saying, I don't care if auntie ain't got no blood pressure medicine or uncle going to get his legs amputated because he got diabetes. I'm going to say we want Medicaid expansion if you put it at the federal poverty level only. And if anything over that, you got to get a job. There's a work requirement. Realizing that if one person in the household gets that little piece of a job, it puts them over the poverty line and now they don't qualify. But you already knew that, didn't you? Because your little HMO and your friends that lobby you know that as long as you can get that money, can you craft some legislation so we keep getting paid? So when you see them there, you're acting a fool because you're waiting to graduate so that you can go work in that same legislature for these people and one day take their place. And anytime you see a legislature like the one in Jackson, Mississippi, or Baton Rouge, Louisiana, shrunk by 80,000 people this week as the white horde that started, as they always do throughout the South, beyond and behind the Cotton Curtain, begun with, let's start our own school district. Shout out to Birmingham, Nashville, shout out to Atlanta and all these, starts with that. And failing that, you then create your own city. St. George is now the latest white enclave, sucking resources from the greater Baton Rouge area. Heard Gary Chambers talking about this earlier this week. But in Mississippi, when you look in those legislatures that are passing this, these super majorities of Republicans, also known as white nationalists, as far as I'm concerned, how do you get a super majority of white nationalists in states that have a plurality of non-whites, particularly blacks, Mississippi and Louisiana being two of them? You get a plurality because you don't care about human beings. And the idea that we should continue to try to craft language of conciliation when in fact that has never worked in world history is patently absurd. See, this ain't on them, it's on us. Sam Jackson said, I was getting the guns. My mama told me the FBI came by the house. I went to LA for 2 years, came back and finished my degree in drama because I thought I could change some minds this way. But guess what? Once you're Nick Fury, you got to fight everybody the government tell you to fight. So that's not going to change any minds. Once you got a lightsaber, you might be on the side of the angels in Star Wars, but at the end of the day, the subversive action of even our artists has to take into consideration that the world around us is on fire. So how am I being a rap beef when everything is on fire? Marvin Gaye made a choice. Sam Jackson, a little less discriminate in the roles he takes, at least in projecting forth this sense of a kind of inviolate character who is not going to budge off his principles, is going to keep a straight line. At least in that, Samuel L. Jackson has projected forth a sense of strength. It probably was the same sense of strength that he projected in that boardroom when they took Martin Luther King Daddy hostage. In other words, I'm saying that everybody has a role to play. And what will happen, I was looking at our brother Lawrence Ross, who's written about violence on college campuses. I think Blackball was one of his most prominent publications on this. And he was on social media this week saying that these white kids at Ole Miss, the University of Mississippi, that these white kids will no doubt be portrayed in the torturous white commercial news entertainment media as misguided, as young. There may come an apology. Although what Lawrence said is that the apology these days might also very quickly then be accompanied by an assertion that these are my First Amendment rights, as if there are First Amendment rights. What are First Amendment rights when you can do that at Ole Miss? You can go to the University of Southern California and literally attack people who are being very peaceful, and the police stand back a few yards and watch the whole time, and then move in to arrest the people that you attack. That makes you part, Kyle Rittenhouse light, of the attacking force. You deputy police at that point. But the press, the white commercial news entertainment media press, and the Negroes who are trying to keep that check will refer to them as counter protesters. They're not counter protesters. No. These are extensions. These are deputy cops at this point. You're attacking these people. So whether you do it at the University of Southern California, whether you do it at Ole Miss, they will be characterized in this commercial news entertainment media as being misguided or being full of fervor. And if they make any statement at all, there will be the repentant, I didn't know, but followed very quickly with the vitriolic, but it's my First Amendment right. There are no First Amendment rights when you call the police simply because somebody said, you got to, in the words of John Lennon, all we are saying is give peace a chance. Arrest them. Oh man, I'm loving it. You know why I love this? because this has to come to a head. This has to come to a head. But I want to start at the beginning, and I'll come back to all of this in summary fashion very quickly. As I said on Monday night in office hours, and again, a place we control, not billionaire funded by the people, and more people come in every day. Sitting there with consistently on Monday nights over 2,000 people and beyond, because the counter we get from the app hits that too and then goes on. I'm just thinking about that. This is amazing. This is a huge class. This is a huge conversation we're having. And as I said on Monday night, I was rereading some essays about Ken Burns's Civil War. A bunch of historians arguing with each other, and then Ken Burns comes in and he writes an essay in response to them, and they're back and forth. And when Ken Burns said, the Civil War, United States Civil War was the closest the United States came to committing what he called national suicide. I kind of chuckled to myself and thought, yeah, that was the closest to date. But this country seems determined to kill itself. But it's not going to kill itself in one fell swoop. It's part of a larger system that is deteriorating. And we'll come back to that. But I brought that up. And then we went into conversation, which was, I think, really a highlight. Going through the various rooms in Nubia, clusters of people who have shared interest and who are exchanging information. And one of our brothers, Russ Smith, wrote a comment as we're reworking, because we've revised now the framing questions for the Introduction to Africana Studies class that we teach. And we're going to do a new iteration. But I said, let me take the opportunity after almost 20 years of working with these framing questions to retool these questions for reasons we've talked about in Nubia. But Russ, an attorney by training, Russ wrote a comment, because I asked people a couple of weeks ago to think about the framing questions as they've been redrafted, make comments, make criticisms, make suggestions as we retool for the course. A course that has started out the largest one in the world. And that now we're in an iteration now, which, as far as I'm concerned, far surpasses the stuff that people pay thousands and more to take at universities and colleges and universities. We're not going to argue with y'all. We're going to start our own. Why? Because we can fund ourselves and do our own. But Russ wrote thoughts on the new framework. And he said, part of the great value this forum, this space, this Nubia has brought me, he writes, is a reordering of my mental landscape about the African quote unquote pause that has occurred within the last 500 plus years of European dominance in the world. Something that's eroding. That's what we're seeing. Yes, it's college campus protests. Yes, it's the Palestinian, the assault on Palestinian lives and the assault on Israeli lives that pushed the latest iteration of the assault on Palestinian lives. And what is clearly, any day now, we might see the International Court of Justice swear out a warrant on Bibi Netanyahu, the greatest mass murderer to date of the 21st century. Regardless of what some of these billionaire donors say, we'll come back to that in a minute, particularly at Brown University. But this moment is coming to an end. It isn't just these moments. Palestine is a trigger. People saying, Palestine, what about Sudan? What about Haiti? What about Congo? Yes, all of it. But understand that on these college campuses, students are making those connections. I saw the Howard students making the connection the other night. I'm standing out there, sitting out there, listening to them, talking with them, checking on them. Then when I saw James Early coming back when he and Andy Shalal were over there, and we're standing in front of Sankofa and debriefing, and he says, I'm very encouraged by these young people. So they're connecting the dots between mass incarceration, between mass murder by the Israeli Defense Force, by who's subsidizing the Israeli Defense Force, their tax dollars, by who's training those police that are coming on those college campuses, which includes the state of Israel, which includes the foreign and domestic policy, which is often consistent between Republicans and Democrats, which includes people like the President of the United States, who continues to waver and who will be down in Atlanta the same day that Daniel Omotosho Black, our brother, becomes a faculty member, speaking as the commencement speaker at Clark Atlanta University in the morning. And I'm saying, man, Dan, I got to figure out how to get to Atlanta. Now I'm worried about it because, by the way, on May 19th, that's Malcolm X's birthday too. The mummy, Joe Biden's what we speaking at Morehouse. I'm saying, are we even going to be able to get around the AUC? They've dispatched Cedric Richmond, former Congressman Richmond, domestic policy advisor to the Biden administration, Cedric Richmond, a Morehouse graduate. He has been dispatched to be in conversation with the Morehouse campus. Over 80 faculty members on a remote call with the Morehouse leadership, President David Thomas and others at Morehouse, around this question of, we know he's coming. We know Joe Biden is coming, and we know commencement ain't the most ideal place to have a conversation, but we're going to need to talk to him before he gets up to talk to us. And there are faculty members at Morehouse, and I have this because I know many of them, my colleagues and my friends, longtime comrades, who are saying, I'm not going to see at Morehouse when the faculty walks in, they're small enough to sit on the stage behind the dignitaries and the commencement speaker. And I know Morehouse faculty say, I'm not putting my robe on and sitting behind Joe Biden, not in this moment. One Morehouse student, at least one, was arrested at Emory because they were part of the Atlanta citywide protests that had taken place. 2 students from Howard got caught up in the DC-wide encampment, which is over at George Washington University in Foggy Bottom section of DC. And they say, I'm not putting my robe on sitting behind. So in that gestation, in that work, what we're seeing is that, yes, Palestine was the point of entry, but there's a robust branch of Friends of the Congo at Morehouse. Shout out to my man Sam Livingston, my big brother Sam Livingston, who has been on that wall for many years. And of course, the great Maurice Carney, who leads that work nationwide in many ways, Friends of the Congo. They are connecting Congo and Haiti. They are connecting it to Palestine. There's no separation between oppressed people struggling and those who have some relative privilege, like college professors and students, are now entering the fray. We've seen this before 1968 at Columbia. We've seen it before 1968, 1969, San Francisco State University, Howard University, a lot of other places. We've seen it before to the point where Obi and them was looking like, man, they'll beat up them white kids. What the hell will they do to us? What's going on? What's happening, brother? We've seen it before. If you've seen it before and you recover your memory, you have to understand what is going to come next, because we know how this moves. I'll come back to that in a minute. But again, Brother Smith raised this question. He said, the great value of this forum, the great value of this space we call Nubia, is that we're having these robust conversations around reordering. And he says, it's reordered my mental state, my mental landscape about the African, quote unquote, pause that has occurred within the last 500 plus years of European dominance in the world. He said, I've been trying, he writes, to digest and understand the frameworks being developed in the pursuit of Africana studies. And it occurs to me that I may not know what our objective is. Oh, those of you who were there Monday night, that opened up a whole nother conversation. I may not know what the objective is. This is what's being bandied now. This is what's being discussed now in this moment when clearly something is emerging, something is struggling to be born. And we want to know, what is the objective? You want divestment on these college campuses? Do you want to cease fire? Do you want to put Bibi Netanyahu in jail? What do you want? Do you want Medicaid in Mississippi? Do you want a job? Do you want to own your own home? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you want to be a billionaire? Do you think you're going to be a billionaire? Can everybody be a billionaire in the capitalist society? But, Russ raises the question, what is the objective as we grapple with this framework? He goes on and says, I know there's already probably an already voiced answer to this question, but just in case it's worthwhile to ask it. I love that, how we have this conversation. Here's what Russ Smith asked on Monday night. Well, before Monday night, in which we got a chance to talk about, because he came on as the last person as we had a dialogue with our couple of thousand plus people. He says, is Africana studies designed to be reparative to those of us old heads who were fed a peripheral history of the African experience in the world, mostly focused on the North American experience? Or do we do a complete redo of the process in order to preserve or reestablish the proper timeline perspective of the struggle? He says, I see this as a subtle distinction. The first frame requires a reference point to the existing and traditional American and European narratives and acts as a point of departure, a stepping off to mend the story. He puts mend in quotation marks. I want to pause there and think about that in the context of what we're talking about this morning. Can you mend this story? We open with an indigenous man who said, they beat my language out of my mouth. I remember my name, but nothing else. How do you mend that? Whether it be the Bee Gees or Al Green. How do you mend a broken man? How can the wounded ever win? How can you stop? Here's the bulletin. You can't. The rain from falling. That what makes the world go round. Yeah, see, there are several things at play there. The wounding To quote the great Sonia Sanchez, who gives us that seventh principle, which guides those six framing questions, which is, six conceptual categories, which is, yeah, but how do it free us? To quote her in another context, a book of poetry that she wrote, the title of which was Wounded in the House of a Friend. You could be wounded in the house of a family member, of a community member. What happens when you're wounded in a space where they came here with no intent to recognize your common humanity, but to take everything from you, to beat everything out of your mouth? In those boarding schools, except perhaps your name, if you can hold on to it. And as you reflect on it, as you recover your memory, you begin to weep. So when Al says, there's a subtle distinction between the two things he raises. There's a subtle distinction. Is Africana studies designed to be reparative to those of us old heads who were fed a peripheral history of the African experience in the world, mostly focused on North American experience? That's the work of Black studies on a lot of these college campuses. It's become a kind of corrective, if it can be. What Manning Marable, who taught many years at Columbia, of course, at the time he made transition, was on faculty at Columbia, as Manning Marable would call the corrective function of Black studies. In the university sense, we've jailbroken the Black university, by the way. I'm not talking about what we're doing. I'm talking about how it's perceived in the university, which took it off course from what it was meant to do in the 1960s, 68, 69, and so forth, when these students were against the Vietnam War, when they were against American militarism globally, and they were for Black studies like Samuel L. Jackson and James Early at Morehouse. The move was to make Black studies a place that would make Black people coming into those spaces and other people who weren't Black realize our common humanity and act on college campuses. And at Black schools, this was the struggle for the Black university. At places like Howard with Nathan Hare, our graduates, we had a convening for them on Wednesday night, and we talked about the original purpose of Black studies. Howard's department goes back to 1969. And we talked about the fact that it was never meant to join the university and become part of the university. It was meant to draw the resources of the university into the grounding space, which is the community, the space that we have now in Knarrative and Nubia, which isn't an academic space, isn't a Black study space in the way that it has become very profitable for people to write about things and never bust a grape in a fruit salad, which is why more and more faculty, as I've seen them over the last week, began to take a side and be very public with it. It's been very encouraging to see Ruha Benjamin give the talk that she gave at Spelman a couple of weeks ago, where she says these petty bourgeois Negroes are not going to save you, whether they are the mayor and police force and everything else of Atlanta. Oh, you got a test coming on May 19th, petty bourgeois leadership of Atlanta. Are you going to follow the Judas Goat tactics and strategies and heartfelt, determined purpose of the mayor of New York City? Or are you going to do something different? If past is prelude and they are tying Palestine to Cop City in Atlanta, I think we know the answer to it before it ever happens. You are willing to wield the baton on your children before anybody else will, to prove to your master that you can be trusted, even though there's nothing you can do to prove to your master that you can be trusted. So when Russ asked that question, is Africana studies designed to be reparative to those of us old heads who were fed a peripheral history of the African experience in the world, mostly focused on North American experience? Yeah, that will be part of it in the academic settings. But ultimately, you can't evade the fact that that's not going to be enough, because the corrective can't be corrective, because how can you mend a broken heart? How can a loser ever win? In other words, how could you mend something that was never whole to begin with? That's why every time I hear somebody talking about fighting for the soul of America or repairing, what are you talking about repairing? This birth defect is structural. Which brings me to the second thing that Russ raised, which I read before, but I'm going to read it again. He says, or do we do a complete redo of the process in order to preserve or reestablish the proper timeline perspective of the struggle? See, that means you got to renegotiate everything. These young people saying divest, and it's got the billionaire class and the donor class terrified. Why? Because they know that money is one thing. They ain't about to lose their money. That's one thing. But perception is another, because they're two, at least, well, there are several powers in the world. There's nuclear weapons. There's all the money in the banks and all of the influence that brings. But then there's the people of the world. That's the ultimate power. And they know that the push for divestment, whether these universities never divested or not, and in the struggle at Brown, apparently, some of the people, the administrators, told some of the donors, oh, don't worry, we'll have a vote, but we're not going to divest. Yeah, but the fact that you're having a vote at all is what they're terrified about, because now you've put it on a table in a way where it can't be reversed, which comes back to Russ. So do we do a complete redo of the process? Redo of the process. And Russ said, I see this as a subtle distinction. A subtle distinction. He says the first frame requires a reference point to the existing and traditional American and European narratives and acts as a point of departure. A stepping off, he says, to mend the story. Well, that's the corrective as far as I'm concerned. That has its limits, because you've bought into a narrative that you're trying to mend, but in mending it, you're going to find that there's going to come a moment when you're going to have to make a choice. Our colleague Nicole Hannah-Jones, 1619 Project, to me, 1619, 1776, the same date. It doesn't matter. 1787, the same date. 1492, the same date. 1528 with the Spanish, the same date. You're talking about settler colonialism. Now, if you're going to do that, do you have to then accept the narrative of settler colonialism and then just try to mend it? How the hell are you going to mend that? But, as Richard Pryor said, oh, what about us? We fought the Indians. Shut up, fool. You want the Indians mad at us too? You beat the tongue out the man's mouth, and then you want to take the side of the people that did the beating and said us too, we in it too? This is the conundrum of the Buffalo Soldiers that Gerald Horne is grappling with in his book, The Counter-Revolution of 1836, when he says we celebrate the Buffalo Soldiers, but remember that in many ways they were on the wrong side. So when Russ asked that question of what we're trying to mend, I think what we find is the more that we push that, what Reggie Bryan, a broadcaster, the ancestor Reggie Bryan for many years at WHAT, in now WURD, in Philadelphia, had a radio show every day, 5 days a week in Philly called In Pursuit of Truth. As we go forward, and he would always sign off with say, it's not the things you know to get you in trouble, it's the things you know that just ain't so. As we pursue that truth, you're going to find out that 1776, 1619, 1787, 1492, 1528, all them dates that are tied to this narrative are going to collapse under the weight of your pursuit of truth. That project is going to overflow the boundaries that you claimed was supposed to be set. And it's interesting to see as this bright line is drawn. A professor on the faculties of the University of California, Los Angeles, and Columbia University, brilliant sister who is credited with popularizing and giving some heft to the concept of intersectionality, a person who was present as a student, as a Hasty Fellow, University of Wisconsin, and then connected to all of these movements in the 1980s and going forward. Kimberly Crenshaw is being dragged on social media saying, well, you haven't mentioned Palestine once. You haven't said, understand. You work at Columbia. You work at UCLA. What's going on, sis? I don't have a dog in that fight. Because in many ways, I see that fight as a fight in a pet store between pets. At the same time, when a pet bears the fangs and says, I'm no longer putting up with it, I'm cheering on the people who are in the privileged Ivy halls. Ruha Benjamin didn't just make that speech at Spelman. That sister's on the faculty at Princeton, and she went to the encampment along with a few more of my colleagues from African American Studies at Princeton and took a stand. And the Princeton faculty have taken a stand. They've written that letter. They've pushed forward. You got to be able to do that, just like the people at Dartmouth, just like my colleagues down at Morehouse. They're pushing now. Oh, you got a problem now. You knocking down philosophy professors with your punk ass on the campus of Emory University, but at the same time, they're pushing back. Why? We can be in our common humanity, but if you're going to put your bulletproof vest on, I'm going to put mine on too. And when Russ asked that question about mending the story, how can you mend a broken heart? Walter Johnson's book, The Broken Heart of America, about St. Louis, the gateway to empire, that arch leading toward the Pacific Ocean. If you're going to tell the truth, it's going to become a much more complicated history, and it's going to push past the capacity to mend and get to that second thing, Russ feels, which is really our objective, as we talked about on Monday night, which is redoing the whole thing. He said the second is more holistic, centering the European dominance of the world in its proper place in the timeline. When you center European dominance in the world in its proper place in the timeline, you know what happens? You find out that tick-tock, 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 not the app, the real thing. You know what time it is now? Yeah, the age of Europe has already receded. It's getting ready to collapse under its own weight. But that's what happens when empires, they come and go. So you understand. And tell me, friend, how in the world have you been? Because I see what's in the newspaper. Are things really getting better like the newspapers say? Yeah, nah. Is it counter-protesters, as the newspapers say? Nah. And tell me, friend, how in the world have you been? Yeah, I know about the sports, will our ball club win the pennant? Do you think that we can win? Yeah, but how have you been? The thing is collapsing. Russ nailed it. He says the second is more holistic, centering the European dominance of the world in its proper place in the timeline. The second seems to be better, also seems to be better as a teaching tool for those of us who are or will be our descendants. This is what we're talking about. So we think about this. This is a question, what we're in right now. This is a question of when the moment, so to speak, meets action. And guess what? It ain't the first. This is what James Early is telling those young people at Howard the other day. Yesterday. He's saying, look, we had a moment. Every generation has a moment. That's why we have a conceptual category called cultural meaning making. In a particular moment, what are you doing in 1969, 1970, 1971? Brother Obie and Brother Marvin and them come together and say, what's going on? What's going on? You know what? While we're at it, what's happening, brother? And while we're at it, oh, mercy, mercy me. Things ain't what they used to be. Oil wasted on the ocean and above high sea, fish full of mercury. While we're at it, mercy, mercy me, the ecology. Oh, come on now. That's cultural meaning making in a moment. But you know why we still sing those songs? You know why those songs, among others, are being played in these encampments alongside Fela Kuti? Oh, I was watching some of the broadcasts. I'm listening to some of the things. I'm seeing some of the footage. And then I hear look at him playing Fela. You know what kind of courage it takes to take on the whole Nigerian government when they ain't throwing your mama out a window? Shit. Got nothing about it. Cultural meaning making. Our artists have to take a stand. Sam Jackson said, I went back because maybe, I'm still the Black Power guy, but maybe I'll take the stage. Maybe I'll take the film and I'll do it that way. Fast forward. Here we are talking about Drake versus Kendrick. Are you serious right now? Of course you are, because every generation gets to make its own choices. But the momentum of memory is why we have that sixth category. And that is movement and memory. How are these things echo over the years? So you can have an undereducated Mississippi state legislator in training on the campus of the University of Mississippi yelling at people standing for our common humanity. Keep yelling. I want you to yell. I want you to yell at Alabama. I want you to yell at Mississippi. I want you to yell at University of Texas. I want you to yell at Texas A&M. I want you to yell at Auburn. I want you to yell at Duke. I want you to yell to the top of your tiny lungs at those places. Yell long enough for the athletes to finally understand that they're the ones with the power. I want you to yell in Arkansas so loud that John Calipari can't get a black basketball player to play there. Or a white one who looks at our common humanity. Or anybody who says, until this campus changes, I won't throw a ball. I won't catch a ball. I won't chase a ball into place. I don't really care what the entertainment folks talking about. No, I'm talking about the fact that you have that power. So y'all keep on making them chicken noises. Do you really want that smoke at the University of Southern California? I want you to continue to do that. USC is going to have a form of its commencement at LA Memorial Coliseum. Yeah, they are. Why is LA? Why is the LA Coliseum so? Oh, that's right. That's where O.J. Simpson played for the University of Southern California. But you're not going to let Ansa Tabasam, the valedictorian of USC's graduating class, you're not going to let her speak because of a Facebook post in solidarity with the Palestinians? Oh, you showing. Your sheet is showing. Your hood, your clan hood showing. Your fear is showing. Your donor list is showing. But guess what else is showing? The people. People versus privilege. United Auto Workers Local 4811 is threatening to strike in the University of California system because some of their membership are the teaching assistants at the University of Southern California. And they saying, anytime you got people coming on campus, throwing barricades, throwing firecrackers, punching people who are engaged in a simple act of nonviolent protest, and the police standing across the street looking at them, and then they go in and arrest the people you was fighting against who ain't done nothing to you. He said, that's discrimination. That's a violation of their constitutional rights, and we're going to go on strike. Now you scared. The Brill Cream, or maybe that's Murray's, back here of the governor of California. Oh, Gavin Newsom, you're the paragon of liberal ideas, right? You even had a task force to study reparations in California, though you stood up and said you ain't gonna get no money for the actual reparations. I understand you're playing it back and forth with your tooth in your mouth, almost looking like a 21st century Dean Martin. Drink to me only with my... I don't think Donald Trump, it's all fun and games. To this young Muslim sister is the highest academically performing undergraduate and gets to make the speech until you say, oh, hell no, what are we going to do? And it doesn't matter whether it's public or private, University of California, Los Angeles, or the University of Southern California. You trying to shut it down at this point. But at that moment, the people, the United Auto Workers Local 4811 say, oh, slow your roll. You ain't going to stop them, but you're going to jump on these people who are being attacked, and you're going to send your thugs, your punk ass cops over there for them? Guess what? We ain't coming to work. Oh my goodness. And it's not just in the United States. There's an international spread now. Sciences Po, prestigious university in Paris. They were out in front of the Pantheon protesting, the students in France this week. University College London and Newcastle in England, where Martin Luther King spoke. The Australian universities, Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, bubbling in Dublin to evoke Jay-Z and Ireland at the same time. The solidarity movement is moving. These are not counter-protesters, New York Times and CNN. They are provocateurs. We've seen it before, whether it be UCLA, whether it be Ole Miss. These provocateurs, we've seen them before. Ask the old heads in the counterintelligence program who suffered under that. We know what this looks like. And for you all to call them outside agitators, you know who else was outside agitators? The Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, people who weren't from Mississippi, whether it be Louisiana's Dave Dennis, whether it be my man Chuck Neblett from Illinois. Everybody, whether it be my man Charlie Carr from DC, you call them outside agitators too. And guess what? You got a little bit of a democracy out of it, although you don't really want a democracy. We'll come back to that in a minute as well. Well, actually, I might as well mention it now. You probably saw, Prof, and everybody, Washington State this week. Last week, they had their Republican Party convention, state convention, as we talked about it, of course. They want to end the ability to vote for United States senators directly. Now, of course, there's a little something in 1913, same year Jefferson was founded, if memory serves me correctly, called the 17th Amendment. But these hillbillies don't think about that. They're engaged in a full-scale race war in the United States of America. And I ain't talking about no movie. In Washington State, the Republican Party of Washington State said that this is a direct quote, we are devolving into a democracy, they said. Because congressmen and senators are elected by the same process and in the same pool. They said, we do not want to be a democracy. That's not a misquote. Many of y'all already know this. We do not want to be a democracy. So they passed a resolution, went forward and said, you should use the word republic or use the word republicanism in opposition to the word democracy and the Democrat Party, the principles of which we ardently oppose. They said, we oppose legislation which makes our nation more democratic. This is what they said. This is written down. They passed this resolution. Were there some people who said no? Sure, but it wasn't nearly enough. These hillbillies engaged in MAGA. And ain't just MAGA Mike standing on the steps of a building at Columbia saying, maybe we should call the police. We know you from Louisiana. We know you from that miserable hillbilly horde that haunted the halls of the legislature in Baton Rouge, shrunk this week by 80,000 people as that Supreme Court in Louisiana confirmed that you could recreate a parish called St. George, because there was an old parish called St. George back in the day. You do remember. In fact, you sing that in your heart. Sometimes it even bubbles up out of your mouth. Oh, I wish I were in the land of cotton. Old times there and not forgotten. Look away. Look away. That's a song that is well known on the campus in Oxford, not England, Mississippi. Ole Miss, but they had the stars and bars in their school colors for years. They changed it to a bear, but in their heart, oh, I wish I were in the land of cotton, you know? Standing next to you, ideologically, as MAGA Mike, wishing he was in the land of cotton. They should call in the National Guard with that wooden Pinocchio slit mouth like this. I'm looking at this guy like, is this a doll? I'm trying to understand. I mean, I understand the blow-dried remakes, which you have the Hillbilly Horde try to remake itself for a national audience. MAGA Mike is clearly in that vein. But your friend, Chinless Tom Cotton from Arkansas, he always ready to fight somebody as long as somebody else doing the fighting. You understand? And so the idea now that you're ginning up this base so that your Republican Party in Washington State said, we oppose democracy and wrote it down. So it isn't just about the protests on the college campuses. It's about we're meeting a moment that Russ Smith kind of evoked in the conversation we had Monday night for 2+ hours. We went over a little bit, which was a beautiful thing in that conversation. And we're going to pick that up on Monday because we are now in a moment of an inflection point. We ask ourselves, what happens when the interests of the people clash with the interests of the privileged? What happens? Well, news this week. You want to know how Tony Blinken, the Secretary of State, been back and forth so much to the so-called Middle East at a moment when the face of American empire is blacker than it's ever been. Under George Affirmative Action Bush, meaning the great beneficiary of affirmative action Bush, George W. Bush, you had Condoleezza Rice out of Birmingham, and you had Colin Powell out of the Caribbean by way of the Bronx. You had two Secretary of State, National Security Advisor, but now you got the whole ass UN ambassador, Linda Thompson Greenfield, looking like she's having indigestion when she got to put her hand up in the UN Security Council to block something or to, under orders to let it go or don't let it go. But then you got two dudes, Brown and Austin, Secretary of Defense and the chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The face of empire is black. Even as continental Africans in West Africa, like Africana, got to go. And by the way, France, we might continue to sell uranium, except we going to keep the money this time. So Macron, you got a choice. Either you don't have no lights in France or we get our money. The whole thing, we're in a moment of an inflection point. Palestine is the point of entry, but it is by no means the only thing on the table. And young people, students, have the capacity more than any of us to connect the dots because at least rhetorically, their job is to study. We know increasingly that's not the case. As I grade these papers and see AI fingerprints all over everything, we know increasingly that it's about context and about networks and it's about internships and about branding than it is just a deep accretive act of slow reading, discussion, debate, contemplation. We know that it's increasingly not about that. However, at least as a category, students have time. Why are these students doing this? Because they studying. You ain't studied in a long time, but you simply seem to know all of the, Oracle or whatever, this latest hip hop beef. I won't listen to it. I'll listen to it at some point. My last class was last week at Howard, so I'm under no obligation to remain completely current. And quite frankly, I'm trying to read. We are now shifting into the high gear. So we take a quantum leap in the summertime because I don't have to keep all that trash in my head in real time. I can keep it in concentrated doses so that I'm not unaware of it. So, this hip hop beef, I'm like, I done heard about it. I listened to a couple of songs twice. I heard a remix of Barry White underneath that Kendrick joint. I'm like, okay, I see what this is. Now, note to self, keep going. But the point I'm trying to make is this. The question, what happens when the interests of the people clash with the interests of the privileged? We're seeing that the privileged are trying to hold on to something that is all slipping away. It has been slipping away for decades, but now it's being accelerated because in part it's being pushed by a sliver of the privileged who have joined with the people, beginning with the students, including the faculty, and increasingly going global in this protest because there's mass murder taking place. It isn't the only mass murder in the world. It's being connected to the other mass murders of the world. And it ain't white people versus black people. It's about people who are seeing our common humanity against the privileged who don't give a damn about anybody. Israel, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, discussing, among others, joint responsibility for Gaza. In fact, today's New York Times, if I can find it, here we are. Israel weighing deal with Arabs in post-war Gaza, a power-sharing plan. I'm loving the New York Times, y'all. I got to admit. We see what happens when empire is terrified. You see how the language changes. Now, what never changes is selling, you understand? But while the language changes, you see them. I mean, you know, I love this counter protesters. Those aren't counter protesters. Those are provocateurs. You can't write provocateur. For many years, you wouldn't say lie with Donald Trump. But Jerusalem, Dateline Jerusalem. This is Patrick Kingsley. For months, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel has avoided detailed public discussion about Gaza's post-war future. Of course he has, because he's trying to wipe out the people who live there. He's not trying to, yeah, he is. It's not a question of opinion. Why are you going to invade the place you told everybody to go? You're trying to get rid of them. Meanwhile, Jared Kushner goes forward. Abraham Accords, the hell out of here. Condo Accords is what you after, Chief Rocker. He goes on and writes, trying to placate both his far-right allies who seek to rebuild Israeli settlements in Gaza and Israel's foreign partners who want Gaza returned to Palestinian governance, Mr. Netanyahu has stopped short of any specific declarations. Behind the scenes, however, senior officials in his office have been weighing an expansive plan for post-war Gaza. See the language seeping in now? Post-war Gaza. You wouldn't have said post-war Gaza so prominently above the fold, except what? You're being pushed by people. More and more people stop reading. Well, people don't read anyway, newspapers these days. But your language, whether on how people consume their news, is having to change because the people not listening to you. They listen to them kids if they're listening to anybody at WCKX and Columbia Student Radio Station. They're reading the Daily Pennsylvania, where I read an article in the Daily Pennsylvanian, the students who are writing at the University of Pennsylvania in West Philadelphia, saying that Penn is considering putting it to a vote. It's fascinating to me. Remember, Penn is where they sacked the president, one of the billionaire donors who was over to Wharton School. Remember in those ancient days of a few months ago? When the hillbilly horde, this Congresswoman Fox out of North Carolina, who was a community college president, who is now looking for scalps of all these people, or the toady who is now on the short list to become vice president of the United States under Donald Trump out of New York, the Congresswoman out of Stefanczyk out of New York, trying to scalp hunt for Ivy League presidents, got the scalp of Penn, got the scalp of the president of Harvard, Claudine Gay, and all the superstar faculty up there writing these beautiful books about revolution and resistance. Hardly a mumbling word, but some of the more prominent ones, hint, hint. As they took her scalp, and then that's not enough. These donors are pressing forward. And now their children and their children's friends are setting up encampments and liberation zones, and they're saying divest. And some of these same people who were after those scalps are now saying to the presidents on the phone, send the cops in. The president sent the cops in, like the president of Columbia, whose family had to flee Egypt when she was a little girl because Gamal Nasser nationalized industries and took land, and her father was a rich landowner and businessman in Alexandria, where she was born. And that led to a global cycle through the UK, the United States, and eventually as a professional, stints at the World Bank and heading the London School of Economics before she became the president of Columbia University and called the damn police on the children. Why? That phone rang. Do it. Got it. Click. Police. And here come Eric Adams, the one-term mayor of New York City. Glad to do it. Glad to do it. Yeah, go do some yoga and contemplate that in the dark in the basement while you're eating your vegan burger and contemplating the fact that you're a one-term mayor. Because, sir, the people are now organizing. He goes on this article and says, behind the scenes, however, senior officials in his office have been weighing an expansive plan for post-war Gaza, in which Israel would offer to share oversight of the territory with an alliance of Arab countries, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, as well as the United States, according to 3 Israeli officials and 5 people who have discussed the plan with members of the Israeli government. There's a problem with this. So in other words, you're trying to, look, man, you're a pariah, sir. You can't go to Europe no more if the ICJ swears out a warrant for your arrest. You can come to the United States because they're not a signatory and they'll protect you here. But the mummy got problems of his own. You going in front to a HBCU. Now, you went to Howard last year. We don't sit on, it's too many of us to sit on the stage behind the commencement speaker. That's for the trustees and maybe the choir and some other people, you know, the administration, senior administration, the dean, the president, this kind of thing. But I didn't sit there at the MCI Center last year and sit there while you skinned and grinned. I didn't go down there sitting in front or behind you, Joe. But guess what? That was then. Morehouse ain't Howard. And there's a war going on, and you're out here crucifying people or sitting by quietly. And then when you do say something like you did this week, it's that mumbling both sidism that's going to get you run over in the street. Because while the Democratic Party is fighting within itself, and Bernie Sanders, now a registered independent, came on the floor of the United States Senate this week and said that this, and then gave an interview afterwards where he said this is Joe Biden's, could be Joe Biden's Vietnam. While all that's going on, guess who is in lockstep solidarity? The Christian soldiers, the white nationalist Christian soldiers of the white nationalist party, because they don't give a damn. You see, it's key to their theology. Israel must be protected so that when Jesus come back, the end game can start. You want to talk about anti-Semites? Are you serious right now? Are you serious, MAGA Mike? Are you serious, Chinless Tom Cotton? Are you serious right now, JD Vance? Are you serious, Tim? Scott, are you serious right now? It's a serious times. It's not time to talk about whether or not that's my friend or not my friend. I'm sorry, Bakari. It's not whether it's my friend or not my friend. No, this is a moment when the white nationalist party has dropped all pretense, called the police on everybody, and it's saying we must protect them, because at the heart of anti-Semitism, or so I thought, was the idea that because of who these people are, they are pawns in the game, and we don't trust them, and we don't love them, and we hate them, and we don't care whether they die, and we're willing to sacrifice them. Have you read the theology of the white nationalists and why Israel is so important? You really want to talk about anti-Semitism? No, you don't. You want to answer the call of your master. Okay, how many tours you went to the Holy Land? Oh, I don't care. Because when it comes time to take a stand, there's a bright line been drawn, and you're on the wrong side of it. Joe Biden gonna have some decisions to make between now and the 19th of May, Malcolm X's birthday, when he stands up in Atlanta in front of Morehouse College. I don't care how many petty bourgeois Negroes, as Ruha Benjamin said, is going to surround him so to make sure nothing happens to him. No, nothing should happen to him. We don't want violence against anybody, but Ruha said it at Spelman a couple of weeks ago. The petty bourgeois Negro class is not going to save you. It ain't going to save nobody. So we see now what's going on globally is forcing Netanyahu, who's just trying to stay out of jail personally, forcing him to the table. Shuttle diplomacy. Okay, well, we got to figure out something, but that's not going to work. Why? The Saudis is like, no, you got a two-state solution. And what we talk, you got to do something for the Palestinians to create this notion that they are protected in a state formation which recognizes all their rights. That's what we're trying to do. United States is like, look, we don't give a damn. We're just trying to keep Iran at bay. We got China to worry about. Israel, what you doing? BB's like, I'm trying to stay out of jail. Y'all keep giving me money so to do it. And Bernie Sanders stood on the floor of the United States Senate this week and said, hey, no more money. Wait a minute. No more money. You say no more money? No more money. You done gave all these billions to these people. You got to shut off the tap, Joe. This is a problem. And people are saying, see, we got to fight Joe. You damn sure got to fight Joe. Domestically, you got to fight him on foreign policy. You got to understand that when it comes to that level, the Democrats and Republicans are the same, except they're not the same, because when Trump gets back in, guess what? You think police on college campuses, that's the least of your trouble. They're going to lose the whole state apparatus. And then we get to fight for real, which is not something that people should be eager to do if you've ever know what that means. It's very interesting to see now how this protest has changed flavor, and once it overflows the boundary of the least of these, and you got some of the children of the privileged joining the people. And this is a problem. So I'm gonna kind of wind this up some. These university protests were over 2,000 now. Last number I saw yesterday is about 2,300, and counting, people being arrested. You know, when we see that, our response has to change. You know, we're talking about rap beefs. Maybe you should go back and listen to what's happening, and listen to Obie Benson, you know, listen to Timmy Thomas, who was writing during that period. Why can't we live together? Edwin Starr, War, what is it good for? I mean, you know, use your cultural meaning making differently as this thing spreads internationally, as the counter protesters ramp up their thing as deputy cops, provocateurs at places like Ole Miss and UCLA. Eric Adams with his propaganda. Dartmouth trying to back up off of what it did. Annalise Orleck knocked down by the police. And then the president of Dartmouth says that, you know, I love these college presidents at these schools that love to claim when they're recruiting students that they are a place where ideas are shared and there's a free exchange of ideas. The University of Chicago, who had a very famous statement years ago that said, we don't cancel speakers because of their politics. We don't, and the right wing love that shit. Now it's like, oh no, you got to shut this protest down. Hold on, Christian soldiers. Hold on, white Christian nationalists. It was all good when you had racists come up here talking and UFC said freedom of speech. You don't like freedom of speech like that no more? Guaranteed. Lawrence Ross said, guaranteed that this young guy and his friends at Ole Miss that started this crazy foolishness down there in Oxford this week, when he does make an apology, he's going to say, but I still have First Amendment rights. Yeah, do you? You have them, because white nationalism is not policed when they attack people. But What is policed is people trying to stand for their common humanity when they start messing with the privileged. So, looking there at Dartmouth, the president of Dartmouth, following in the vein of all these other college presidents, that these quote unquote liberal, so-called liberal, because we understand that this is a myth. The idea of the universities are where these liberals are training our children and they're training them. Really, have you checked out the board of trustees? These are deeply conservative institutions, and you're finding it out now that the people are rising because the big donors are calling and saying, get rid of that president, get rid of that president, lock them kids up. I don't give a damn what you do. I don't care. Get it. Yeah. Is that liberal? Really? Shout out to all the faculty and staff who are joining in solidarity, who are donning the vests like they did in Harlem last week to protect those students and try to intervene. Shout out to people who are getting arrested, who are coming there and saying, we are putting everything on the line, especially the contingent faculty, the so-called adjuncts, because you have no job security, although the illusion of tenure is being stripped as we speak, as people are banned from campuses and told they're not going to be brought back. Orlek responded to the president of Dartmouth after Orlek was arrested and temporarily banned from campus. And then Dartmouth was like, oh, we made a mistake. It's just a technical error. Yeah, because somebody filmed this woman getting beat up by them punk ass cops. Punk ass cops. Yes, you. Yes, you. Erlach said, President of Dartmouth said, seeing Leah Billiok said that while there's bravery in that, facing disciplinary action and arrest, it's bravery in what the students are doing. It's while there's bravery in it, that's them trying to keep their all the way down, rah, we support protest reputation, which is why the HBCUs have a bit of a conundrum if this thing spreads to HBCUs. Everybody holding their breath, by the way, to graduation, hoping that summertime will chill all this out. I don't know that that's going to happen, but you're going to arrest students now who aren't technically in class but are on the encampments. What if they don't leave after graduation? This is where we're facing now. And then your reputation is going to be on the line even more because you claim we're all for social justice. Really? Let's see how close you are for social justice. And ain't nobody tearing up nothing. Ain't nobody killing nobody. Anybody beating up nobody. People beating up are the provocateurs. I'm sorry, you call them counter protesters who are showing up to throw firecrackers and to throw barricades and throw fists at these people who are simply trying to live together, including people from all walks of life, not just Muslims and Jews, black, brown, white, whoever else. I looked at a tapestry of student journalists. And that's kind of hard to do in a place like that. But you saw it. Anyway, she says, while there's bravery in that, taking this stand, President Dartmouth says part of choosing to engage in this way is not just acknowledging, but accepting that actions have consequences. Now, here we go. I watched the video the president of Columbia made saying, we want to restore the trust. We want to heal. That's a lie. You want to do what the donors told you to do. You worked at the World Bank and the London School of Economics. Do you really think we that stupid to think that you got picked to be the president of Columbia because you're trying to advance? No. Now, what you are very good at, however, is dropping into countries and telling them how you're going to do structural adjustment. You worked at the World Bank. We ain't stupid. But maybe you think we are. Then again, maybe some of us haven't developed our full intelligence because we're arguing more about Drake versus Kendrick. But guess what? That number can change too. That's why we do this week after week after week. Orlek responded, the former head of Jewish studies at Dartmouth, who was knocked down, arrested, and then temporarily banned, and now is responding. She responded to the president of Dartmouth and said, quote, her actions have consequences too. The campus is in an uproar. Neither the students nor the faculty have been radicalized in a long time as they're feeling today. This is critical. My man Robin Kelly's on the faculty out there at UCLA. Robin Kelly has used Palestine over and over again his whole life. People are saying, well, where's Kim Crenshaw on UCLA? Where's Kim Crenshaw? She worked at UCLA and Columbia. Yeah, Robin Kelly in the Boston Review this week said that what this is revealing is that universities ain't run by the students and the faculty. Universities are run by trustees and powerful alumni and financial interests. And that collision course between the neoliberal university and the people is now on full display at Brown, at Northwestern, at the University of Minnesota. They've said, we'll put it to a vote, and guess who screamed bloody murder at Brown? Barry Sternlicht. Sternlicht. Barry Sternlicht. Billionaire, He's a billionaire and he's a donor. He's given about $20 million, over $20 million he and his family to Brown University over years. He says he's pausing donations. Why? Because y'all gonna put this to a vote? But the Brown people, the administrators have assured them it won't pass. That ain't the point. Don't put it to a vote. This is gonna be a problem. And then people say, well, what about all people being killed? You know what Sterling said? He said there were more people killed in Iraq, more people killed in Iran, more people killed in... And this is what he said. This is a direct quote. He says, as far as wars go, Israel has been quite muted. As far as wars go, Israel has been quite muted. I'm a billionaire. I'm giving out millions. I'm going to pause my donations till y'all stop. He friends with Mark Rowan. Remember Mark Rowan? Mark Rowan was the guy on the Wharton board at the University of Pennsylvania who helped sack the UPenn president. This guy, Barry Sternlicht, sent his letter that he sent to the president of Brown to the New York Times. That's where I read it. My money. I'm the privileged. Brown's endowment, friends, is $6.6 billion. The students are saying it don't matter. You shouldn't make, the faculty are saying it don't matter. You shouldn't make what? Make decisions based on donors. The administrators looking at them like, you done lost your damn mind. I don't give a damn. I don't give a damn whether it's Brown or Morris Brown. I don't care whether it's the University of Chicago or the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I don't care whether it is UCLA or North Carolina A&D. Do you understand the powerful interests that drive universities these days? It don't drive Narrative in Nubia because we fund ourselves. As Holly Greenman once said to a famous Hollywood filmmaker who asked, how did you get to make Sankofa? They don't get me to make, I can't, they won't let me do anything. Holly said, I let myself. We let ourselves, which is why we can have this conversation. And we'll continue the conversation on Monday as I kind of begin to wind this up. But this is all diversion. I mean, the idea of these student protesters and the counter protesters and the smoke and the mirror, all diversion from what they're protesting about. The murders in Palestine, the related issues as the inflection points for the modern world system come into view. Humans have been trying to make sense of our existence forever. The larger the world gets, the more complex it seems. But these same themes resonate across time and space. This system is not just multipolar at this point. Latest issue of Foreign Policy magazine, I haven't picked it up yet, but I saw it on the stand the other day. I'll probably go back and get a copy. The United States worrying about China, worrying about Iran, worrying about Saudi Arabia that's trying to diversify this kind of thing. The Saudis are trying to take this thing and move forward. Why? Okay, we negotiate with Israel. We'll recognize Israel, but you got to do something for the Palestinians. The Palestinians have gotten no love in the Middle East for many years. But the solitary politics are changing. And by Palestinians, I mean Muslims and Jews. You know, every Palestinian, not a Muslim. There are Jewish Palestinians too, Christian Palestinians as well. All of them come together and we start talking about a Jewish state, as in Israel. This is why James Earl Carter, who is still with us, we were talking about that yesterday with James Early. He said, it's something when you have an Andrew Young as ambassador to the United Nations coming out in terms of Palestinian self-determination. And by the way, we probably saw the news this week, Colombia breaking off diplomatic ties with Israel, Turkey suspending trade ties with Israel, countries deciding to recognize Palestine. It's quite something when you go in Swanee, or Pretoria, as it's often called, the capital of South Africa, as we've done, and you pass by the Palestinian embassy. The thing is fraying around the edges, but the system is multipolar now. It's different things going on. Different people got different interests, but there's also this collapsing moment as well as the inevitability of people, more and more people becoming aware and building solidarity politics in governance formations beyond the social structures, attend the fact that this is what happens at the end of all life cycles of empires. And as Ruha Benjamin said, the Negro's not going to save you. If you're going to be silent about it, fine. But guess what? Talking up later is great. Talking up before is probably better. Note that this was the moment in the 60s, as people are talking about, this is like happened in the 60s. It did. And there are a lot of similarities. But those similarities include the fact that it was the birth of Black studies. I was reading Prosser Gifford, a book I picked up the other day. There's a couple of volumes. This is one of them called Britain and Germany in Africa. No need to buy this book. I'm just telling y'all what I was reading. And it's good because there's another one, a companion volume called France and Britain into Africa. And what Gifford is doing, he was on the faculty for many years at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and then he ran the Klug program at the Library of Congress. Very interesting figure. He transitioned a few years ago. Britain and Germany and Africa, imperial rivalry and colonial rule. The reason this caught my eye is because our memory wants to begin, again, thinking about Russ, our memory wants to begin with the violence that created the societies we're in now, talking about trying to heal them. How you going to heal settler colonialism? As the indigenous brothers said, they sent me to school to beat this out of my mouth. And the only thing I got left is my name, and I weep. How do you mend the broken heart? The broken heart is the thing that started because you was born into that violence. You don't heal that. You rearrange, you restructure it. You renegotiate the terms. But I was reading this and I got fascinated with this guy, Prosser Gifford. His last name is Gifford, Dr. Gifford. And so I started looking around Prosser Gifford, and I was reminded of how the violence of settler colonialism created the modern world system that is convulsing today. During this movement, Columbia 1968, then 1969, 70, the struggles, the fights for Black studies, which attended all of this work, Prosser Gifford was on the faculty of Amherst. Not University of Massachusetts Amherst College, liberal arts college, the small liberal arts colleges. You know, the ones that people say now are irrelevant? Well, guess what? Morehouse is a liberal arts college. Spelman is a liberal arts college. You got to have places where people actually study. What you studying? Well, I'm studying philosophy. What you going to do with that? Think. The hell are you talking about in an age where AI getting ready to replace everything? I'm going to think. What you going to do? But the point is this. That was just a little plug for the liberal arts, but we're past that. We've jailbroken it in Knarrative and Nubia. We understand you can have the full range and you must have the full range. We even call it STEAM. We're just going to work forward in intellectual work. But Prosser Gifford and the faculty at Amherst College write the then president of the United States, Richard Nixon, whose career was revived from the graveyard, from the cemetery in 1968. Why? Because these students are in the street. Why? Because these artists are critiquing and protesting. And there was another Democratic National Convention in 1968 in Chicago. By Chicago, 1968, Martin King killed in April. Bobby Kennedy assassinated after the California primary. So this thing, and out of the graveyard comes MAGA Dick Nixon. And in that process, I was reading David Brooks in the New York Times talking about a recent book, which argues that in the wake of these huge protests, you see right-wing governments come in place. So Brazil, there's these huge protests about, food and education and healthcare and all this. And then you get the Trump of the tropics. Bolsonaro comes in. You see these protests, and what this guy is saying is in the wake of these things, you often see a turn to the right. So what will we see here? And that, we're talking about serious things now. We're not talking about the kind of things where people are kind of lightly informed and got personal opinions. No, we're trying to observe how systems operate. And I don't know that I agree with that completely, although I can't disagree with it until I can see evidence to the contrary. But the idea that we might be, imagine this, imagine in December of this year, Trump coming back in. I know y'all talked about this. I listened to part of that conversation prior. What would a second Trump presidency look like? And we know we don't have to guess. There's Project 2025. They selling the book, for God's sake, out the Heritage Foundation. We don't have to guess. This is the thing about it. They dropped all pretenses. Washington State said we're against democracy, the Republican Party. Louisiana, Mississippi, we're against all this. And here's our plan. When we get back in, it's going to be police for everybody. We putting everybody speak Spanish out the damn country. And we sitting back like, well, Kendrick, did he win or did Drake win? I'm going to tell you who's going to win. The privileged going to win if you don't get your ass together. So reading Gifford, I read the letter that the faculty at Amherst wrote Nixon in 1969 that Prosser Gifford drafted. And here's a line from it. He says, the pervasive and insistent disquiet on many campuses throughout the nation indicates that unrest results not from a conspiracy of a few, but from a sense that the nation has no adequate plans for meeting the crises of society. And there's where Palestine meets everything else. The Mississippi hillbilly horde punishing the citizens of Mississippi regardless of race, culture, or background by not expanding Medicaid with federal dollars that coming to Mississippi that don't match the dollars that Mississippi puts in because they ain't got enough money to kick in on the kitty like that. In Louisiana, St. George Parish, consolidated county governments. There's a county, just like Nashville, Davidson County, Charlotte, Mecklenburg County, Atlanta, Fulton County, because when the hillbillies saw that they were losing the cities, they expanded out to the countries. And now they're starting to pick out pieces. First by saying they want white school districts. And when they can't get that, or even if they can, they then make them into little enclaves, little cities like St. George, what they have here. Washington State voting against democracy in many ways. Knarrative in Nubia is the response to that push in the 1960s, whether it be the white college campus for Black studies programs or the fight for the Black university itself at the HBCUs. We are returning in this space to the original thrust and the original stripping out of the influence of privileged donors, the influence of the people. So we're not talking about these think tanks. We're not talking about these billionaire donors who are trying to cherry pick, who are terrified. We've created a liberated zone, not just an encampment on a college campus, but a place where we can sustain and grow and build. So we know that the Democrats are facing a problem this year. You vote to the degree it will be. A lot of young people don't vote, but those who do, we're going to sit this one out. I mean, the comparisons to 1968 are serious. But we have to understand, I was reading an article that was published this week by Barbara Ransby out of the University of Illinois, Chicago, and some other folks who participated in these struggles in the 1960s, 68, 69 in places like Columbia. And they were saying, never forget the 1980s and the anti-apartheid conflicts. How at Columbia, the anti-apartheid movement in 1984 and 1985 led Columbia to divest in companies doing business in South Africa 5 months later. You think these donors don't understand what's going on? You're going to divest in businesses that do business with Israel? We want you to at least put it to a vote. Okay, we'll put it to a vote. Oh, wait a minute. No, they're not going to vote. And that's not the point. The fact that you're raising it and elevating it to the conversation, you could get more people involved in this. We have one goal and one goal only. It isn't our common humanity. It's the preservation of our interests, whatever they are. For the white Christian nationalists, the preservation of Israel is leading to the rapture, the Holocaust, and the Antichrist, and the coming of Jesus. And then you want to talk about anti-Semitism, you better read. You ain't got to read closely. Just listen to MAGA Mike and his little podcast before he got elevated and had to go and put some real cream in his hair and make that mask look like more than a Pinocchio smile when he's standing on the steps at Columbia. Go listen to him before that. And you realize, oh, the blood should roll cold in your veins. I understand you got to play politics, Hakeem Jeffries, but damn, do you have to get on a stage and with him a few months ago down here in the National Mall? You want to save him as speaker? Whatever. Guess what? Getting involved in the political process means putting more people in the federal legislature so you ain't got to make them deals unless it's in your heart of hearts, at which point we got to switch you out too. Hell, Ilhan Omar's child. You'll put her out of school at Barnard? Ilhan Omar came and said, look, we protect everybody, whether you're pro-genocide or anti-genocide. And they want to string her up. Not the kid at Ole Miss, but Ilhan Omar, who ain't never come out against nobody's common humanity. But the point is that, when Bernie Sanders says this week that it's not just young people on college campuses that are extremely upset about our government's funding of this illegal and immoral war. It's also William Barber. There'll be a Poor People's March coming up in June. They're coming back here. They were here 2 years ago. They're going to be back here now. And he says, who is being attacked shows you who people think are powerless, but in fact are the most powerful people of all. We've got to do something different. And the only way we're going to survive as a species is that the people have to overwhelm those who pick privilege over our common humanity. So, we're going to have to do that. And I mean, whether it's here in the United States, whether it's West Africa, whether it's Haiti, where we saw this week, this provisional council that they put together, this 9-person council, 7 of which you have a vote, 4 of which have been told to put this guy who was the minister of sport in Rene Préval's administration, a previous Haitian prime minister. He's now the prime minister. And 2 of the 7 who have voting privileges are like, oh, we didn't vote for him, and we didn't even have no conversation about it. One of them is one of the representatives is from Aristide's party, Family Lavalier. They're like, what the hell? What are you doing? And then you realize, oh, this is a fix because it's still being driven by Canada, the United States, and France. And CARICOM in on it too. CARICOM trying to mute it, but let's be very clear. Everybody's an agent of power in the empire. And the problem you have in Haiti is the people versus the privileged. Because these armed folk, these armed militias that they call in gangs, and a lot of them behaving like gangsters, Who gave them the guns and who was paying them? A lot of the Haitian elite who are living quite well, driving their sports cars and their Benzes, living in Pétionville and places that are protected in Haiti, while the people suffer and have suffered in, as Randall Robinson would call, an unbroken agony since before 1804. And all this interference means that what is obscured is that the people for the versus the privileged can also be in all black. But the interference is in a modern world system that don't even have that kind of muscle no more. But they are going to fight every day to keep that muscle. So Prime Minister Fritz Belazaire, who was the sports minister in a previous prime minister's administration, who was the prime minister only because the United States took out the guy before him, the elected Jean-Bertrand Aristide, which is where the source of the most recent 20 years of Haitian agony comes from, when you stop the people from having who they wanted. And so what you have now is there is no government in Haiti. There's United States, Canada, and France. Their little groups putting together the core group, and then all the NGOs that they put in place and all that stuff, hand picking, so they can get them Haitians back in line. And we have to understand that we're at a moment where these college protests are are forcing us to come to terms with the fact that we're going to have to build a new world. We got to disabuse ourselves of make-believe, stop playing word games, stop acting like something is that isn't, and remember to be careful what we do, because a lie becomes the truth, to quote Michael Jackson. That's where we are right now. These next couple of weeks are going to be very interesting. Graduation at Morehouse in particular. I'm looking at this next 2-week quarter, and we'll probably be back here next week with some developments. So.
Oh man, there's so much to unpack. As you say, history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
But it rhymes.
And, all that happened in the 60s gave us Nixon. But Nixon's not Trump.
No, he's not. No, he is not. No, he is not. Say some more about that, Prof. It's so true. I mean, and people need to understand that.
I mean, Trump would never resign. caught red-handed,
Nope.
So there, number one, he had a deep sense of the office being important enough to step down. And I remember watching the resignation. I might have been, how old was I? 3 or 4. I was in Augusta, Georgia when it happened, because I remember I was in my Aunt Pinky's house.
Wow.
On the television. And I just remember it being a moment, right? So that could never happen. This man didn't even want to step down when he lost.
That's exactly.
And caused an insurrection that a Black civil rights leader would liken to what's going on campuses is unfathomable where we are right now. It's absolutely.
I'm glad you raised that. Somebody, you probably saw this. You probably commented on it. Gerald Ford pardoning Nixon is all the evidence you need that Nixon committed a crime. Why are y'all acting like you? Why you got to pardon somebody if they're above the law? That's
right.
Wow.
And even with Ehrlichman's his domestic policy targeting Black people, flooding our communities with drugs, and then criminalizing us. And then Reagan said, "Hold my beer." We've had this constant assault, and I'd love that you are critical of Joe Biden, because that's what is required of us.
Absolutely.
But in your criticism, you're not going to commit suicide.
I'm not stupid, right? What the hell's wrong with
y'all? And I don't know how people can't suss that out in their own spirits. That yes, criticism is leveled. Accountability, which is the other thing that we have the power to do, and it looks like what's going on campuses, holding people accountable. I wish these athletes would have the spirit of Lou Alcindor and Jim Brown and Muhammad Ali, Cassius Clay. I wish they would have that spirit to understand, not just putting on a hoodie when Trayvon Martin is murdered, killed. Not put a "I Can't Breathe" t-shirt on. That's cute. But I actually, y'all have the power to change the trajectory of the world. Sport is the one place where whites and Blacks, come together and paint their faces and cheer on their gladiators. It's the one place where they can actually break the backs of corporate America.
That's right. That's those same white kids that were over there messing with those students at Ole Miss have that same screaming when they go to the basketball arena or the football stadium. This is the same. I mean, that's why it's so passionate.
Yeah, they need to find out. They keep effing around and they never find out.
They need to find out.
So,
Like you said, Vietnam is different because it was a draft.
right.
So I mean, you all sending them. We're not going to the Olympics. Like say Muhammad Ali. Now you got name, image, and likeness. There's no price to pay. You know what I'm saying? You have to worry about your 18-year-old child instead of draining jumpers for Kentucky. He's going to be in the bushes trying not to be killed or dosed with Agent Orange. So this is where, can we be selfless though, bro? In a moment like this,
we can. I mean, so the job, you know, and this is something that I grapple with, and I don't grapple hard, you know, it's very easy, is to develop the appetite. You know, we have been force fed this individualism, this selfishness, you know, greed is good, you know, the Gordon Gekko through our art and media. It's been kind of indelibly, maybe not indelibly, hopefully not indelibly. It's been etched on our souls that, you know, get what you can. You know, I keep hearing among us, that's their problem. Why are we involved in what's going on in name the country? You know, and it's like, yeah, that's why I played that Native American, that indigenous person, because our language was snatched from our throats, from our tongues, right? And this happened in our lifetime.
That's right.
And the kids that were in cages not too many years ago, like a few years ago, that somehow mysteriously are now in somebody's houses. We got MMA players adopting, you know, black boys and saying they're not black.
How about that?
Not to mention all the other celebrities, because
no, of course,
it's very, you know,
of course, and of course we see all these black people line up adopting white children and saying that they're not. Wait, I'm sorry, no, I'm sorry, that didn't happen.
Could that happen? Could that happen, Dr. Carr? Could it happen?
I guess it could, I suppose, yes. But I mean, what you raised, you know, how do you grapple with this? I mean, you know, you do it by what people are doing. It never starts with everybody.
No. I reminded Martin Luther King died not popular in the black community.
How about that? Against the war, right? That's exactly
black
right.
People like, you doing too much.
You're doing too much.
Yeah, you putting a target on. Black people were not rocking with Dr. Martin Luther King when he was shot on that balcony.
Nope.
So, not in Moss. Nope. So, you know, we always have this hindsight being 2020. We will always jump on a bandwagon after the fact when it's safe. Like now, people are safely coming out against what's going on in Palestine. But who was the first? When it wasn't popular, when they lost, when they got sat down at their different platforms, when they were told they no longer have a job.
When SNCC, as we talked about when Ethel Minor made transition 2 summers ago, when we spent time here in this conversation about, you know, when SNCC came out against Vietnam and also in support of the Palestinians, and their money evaporated. SNCC's money evaporated. And when I saw Ethel Minor at the 50th anniversary of SNCC, she wasn't even on the panel. She was just in the room. She came up and said, I didn't know. If I had known that this is what's going to happen. And they were laughing about it. And they thought about what James Early told those young people this week. They survived. Tim Jenkins and Joyce Ladner and Dory Ladner, they survived. I mean, they were in their 20s. They put everything on the line. Again, in Mississippi, at same campus of the University of Mississippi. Clyde Stubblefield. I mean, you start talking about, I mean, some of them died. They lost their lives. And now they get congressional medals of honor. Clarence Jones, Medgar Evers. You know why you got to give it to him posthumously? Because the Klansman shot him in the back in Jacksonville. I mean, come on. You giving yourself credit now, bro? Okay, that's very nice. But he's dead because of y'all funky experiment. And like you said, that brother you played at the beginning, he wept because he remembered. We don't even weep no more. Now we call them people immigrants. We done forgotten. You know what I'm saying? We don't even remember enough to cry. You know what I'm saying? We cry when it's America versus the Indians. And then, of course, going to Pierre, what's his name? Bourdieu, who wrote the novels that became the movies. We forget Planet of the Apes is a metaphor for human society. So now we all line up, go see the Ape King, and Cornelius is 300 years in the past. So I'm going to create a whole, no, it's a wonderful day, and fight for the hill. Man, this is a metaphor for this. That's not an ape emperor. That's Trump. You know what I'm saying?
Right. You shave that monkey, the skin is white.
Woo! Look here now.
All right, I'm gonna say less. As they're
making
they're making monkey sounds at black people on that Mississippi campus. You know, making ape sounds, dressed in overalls of with the American flag on it. They, you know, it's very Very
and
clear.
don't follow him home or scrub his social media or check all his texts. And that's when you find out that underneath them 8 sounds is desire. You think we don't see you? Come on. Come on now. Yeah, you made them 8 sounds. Let's check your cell phone. Oh my. Oh, where's Meg the Stallion? And there's the Bayou Barbie and this child. Oh, okay. So them monkey said something underneath them monkey sound, something very primal. You know, y'all love black people. And Paul Mooney said this, has cracked me up. I was looking at something Paul Mooney said. Paul Mooney, man. Paul Mooney was like, you know what? During slavery and during Jim Crow, you wanted us in your house. You want us warm in your bed. You want the minute it went past that, now you want to get away from us. But during slavery, how does that work? During slavery, you wanted to nurse at our breasts.
No, I don't think they want to get away. They want to control.
There it is.
They don't want to get away.
There it is.
They want to control and shape and mold and have power over.
That's
they don't
right.
want us away from them. They want us feeding and cleaning and yassing and jumping off a curb. They don't want us free. They don't want us upright. They don't want us confident. They want us broken.
And you know what? There it is. And that's where the visceral hatred of the athletes and entertainers like Ali comes from. Why do you hate it so much? Because you love them. And you want to control them. And the minute they say you're not under my control, you just turn on them. All those black athletes that became Muslims in the 60s, Kareem and even if they didn't come out with no straight
Ahmad Rashad,
no question, Ahmad Rashad. But I mean, you can't do that. You can't have your name. You know, I was reading Vincent Coretta published a new edition of his book on Phyllis Wheatley. And this is since Fanon, Jeffers, Honoré, and them did her book, The Age of Phyllis, and them. And he said, I'm changing the name of my book from Phyllis Wheatley to Phyllis Wheatley Peters. Why? Because Phyllis Wheatley disappears those last few years. The archive doesn't yield. But Phyllis Wheatley said, I took John Peters' name, my husband, not because I was being subservient, but because y'all gave me that Wheatley name. The Wheatleys were the ones that kidnapped me. So this is a name I picked for myself. You know what I'm saying? Like you said, I'm taking control. He said, so we shouldn't even say Phyllis Wheatley no more. At least say Phyllis Wheatley Peters, because she makes it clear I'm picking a name that I picked. Now we can argue, oh, it should have been an African name. No, we can get to that later. Every generation gets to make its own cultural meaning, but that act is an act of self. That's what these young people, I'm not with you. But the donors, damn the donors. We give a damn about these donors.
And what's crazy, I had a young lady on, she called the universities big hedge funds. And I was like, you're right. And as I'm doing my research, I'm looking at the endowments. They don't need your tuition anymore. So
no.
So now,
are right. That's why I like Scott Galloway at NYU. Scott Galloway in post-COVID, he said, you know what these universities are? They are hedge funds with classes for the children of the investors, and they put a few freakishly smart kids around them as packing peanuts to obscure the fact. And I loved it because on WCKX the other night, the Columbia radio station, they had a they had a young man who graduated from the law school a couple of years ago, and he brought that point up. He said, Columbia and NYU, the two biggest landlords in New York City. This is it was fat to hear these young people. I'm thinking, now you want to say CNN, whatever. Y'all not having this conversation there. Look, Prof, that's why I'm so grateful. I mean, you can have that conversation and do on Sirius. We had that conversation in Narrative and Nubia, and everybody gets to participate. This is what's going to free us. The people. We can free ourselves.
And I'll continue to have it. Yes. And I'm not under any delusion that people are happy with me having it, but you have it anyway. You don't presume that you can't have it because you're free. Either you're free or you're not, right? So I'm not gonna say, oh well, they won't let me say this, or maybe I should phrase this in such a way to not be offensive because I want to keep my job. If that's the premise, then you shouldn't have a microphone.
How about that?
That's just how I feel. I'll wait. And when they tell me I can no longer talk, guess what? Hi, Nubians.
Hi.
We have a whole...
You fix that. Although, what do you think about this?
Anticipated it.
What do you think about this? Just thinking again about the rhythms of how these things move through time and space. Do you think there may come an inflection point in this moment that, as in previous moments, when that move, if and when those moves are made, the people respond in a way that make it impossible
So I dream, because I do dream. I do
Yes,
dream.
indeed.
I dream and hope that that would be the case, but I'm under no delusion that that is, because again, Martin Luther King died being unpopular among Black people.
That's true.
Maybe 10 years, 20 years later, oh man, remember when? To be that, it'll be that moment. Oh
That's
my
true.
God, we used to, oh wow. And then they'll mythologize this moment, into something, because everybody then will have been at the March on Washington. Everyone would have marched with
How about
That's
that?
what happened, right? 90,
That's right.
70% of y'all didn't like King, but everybody marched with him. Make that make sense, really, y'all?
Yeah,
No,
that's
it's
right.
not true. So we're in a similar, what's at stake for people? I imagine people would be wildly quiet, and keep their subscription, like, oh, I would never subscribe, or what, just like we make the adjustment, we
We
make the
have to.
adjustment.
And it's difficult. It's so funny you say that. We had a meeting this week at Howard about our space at African Studies, and we'll be back fully occupying the space. They had some mold abatement and stuff like that. We've been kind of things like that. But the world has changed since we were there pre-COVID. And we told the students this who are graduating, the graduating classes this year, your students who will be graduating this year from Hunter that you had for over the 4 years ago, those students, these are the students who didn't get a high school graduation. These are the COVID kids. And so the flavor of those students now is very interesting. And so even with it, some of these students, they're facing the fact that, okay, if you're going to cancel my graduation, hell, I didn't get a high school graduation. I mean, and I'm a different mindset now.
Right.
The university is being rethought. And when you raise this, it becomes fascinating, because what we are building, is beyond their capacity to, you can't knock this down.
And let me say, the reason why I'm not like heavy on promotion, like please come to Nubia Narrative, because there has to be a commitment. Like I look at people every time Netflix every other month raises our Netflix bill, people threaten to not you keep their subscription, or now the worst thing is I can't give my my password to my mama now. Now I got to get a whole new account. Y'all on some BS. We've been sharing this for forever. Now she getting locked out and I got to buy another, like we threaten, but we want to watch the thing, right? So we always not, just like my commitment to not watch the NFL. Most people did not do that.
Most people didn't do
it. A little bit. I still don't know what's going on. And I missed out on everything, including Usher last year. But that's what it looks like to have a commitment.
Out on some brilliant stuff. Missed out on Lamar Jackson. I mean, I ain't never seen that man throw a pass. I'm like, I would love to watch, but you just Marvin Gaye said, "How much sing love songs in the world on fire?" I mean, come on.
So I mean, either no disrespect,
no disrespect,
but what comes next? But at the end of the day, the day ends. But do you really stand for something, or is it all lip service? So exactly. I open the doors of the church. Narrative here, but what's really here is not now. 10 years from now, do you want to have a place that you imagine can be all of the things? Like every time we need to have a group let's start a group. Okay. What do you want to do? All right. We need architects. Okay. Let's build that group. Lawyers, what are y'all doing? Do you want to we got the think tank, Onyx Society that's being built out right now. We speak with Pam, and others can come, because it's the real democracy. Like I'm not in there, pulling levers or whatever. Whatever's emerging is because people have demanded that this is what they want, right?
That's
so, I'm a subscriber. I actually have 2 subscriptions. I have a monthly and an annual, because I want to put my skin in the game as well and build the thing that I want to see. It's here for everyone, right? So come, narrative.com. K is silent. You can get that nice shirt, jacket that Dr. Carr, because it's members only.
Yeah, I had to do the it is got a members only inspiration.
It is members only. You can only get it if you're a member, right?
So that's right.
It's in the store, but
I little Africa on top. I love it.
I mean that's your race. I mean it's brilliant, but again, none of this happens outside of collaboration. And what we're building is not for right now. It's for a time when we won't be able to convene, where all we'll have is paid and bought for commentators and people who have not your interest but their own. The one thing I can say with full sincerity is that this space was born out of necessity, because a man who is brilliant decided to feed us, and I wanted more. And that's why we're here today. So I'm
we here because you said, let me press record.
Right, because I wanted more. And I
No,
didn't want to be selfish, right? So that's
no.
what that looks like. I didn't want to be the only one
Woo each
being
other.
fed. I wanted everyone to have access to what
I-
comes out of your brain.
I appreciate
And
that.
so that's why we're here. And what it turns into can only happen with people coming and being a part of it and bringing their bricks. So
No, that's right. That's
all right.
right. No, I was gonna say I forget. I think his birthday is this week. It never ceases to. I'm grateful. We all got to go that way. That awful day will surely come. We'll all be ancestors. That is the one guarantee. But the fact that we get to breathe the air for a little while longer with the great son of Alabama, Willie Howard Mays, is a beautiful thing to me. So Willie Mays' birthday is coming up this week. And I just wanted to recognize that I put most of my Willie Mays books in storage, but I can't, this is one I picked up the other day because I have a copy of it, but this one was so cheap. I think I may have paid $3-4 for it. And it's a nice little first edition. Say, hey, the autobiography of, this is autobiography. A lot of books been written about Willie Mays, and I struggle with that, as I said last week, because sports, I enjoy sports. I played sports as a baseball player, but, I'm not going to suborn these owners. But Mays played the game with such brilliance. Just wanted to say that, and I'll end with this. Been very, very happy. This weekend, tomorrow, Monday, some young people are coming down. Maybe about 30 or so young people are coming down from Pittsburgh. I talked day before yesterday with Sean Gibson. Sean Gibson is the head of the Josh Gibson Foundation in Pittsburgh. Sean Gibson's great-grandfather was Josh Gibson. And they're going to bring the young people down. They're going to tour the African American Museum. They want to come to Howard, which is why he reached out to me. One of his friends for many years, one of my former students, was a quarterback at Howard University, a left-handed kid out of Western Pennsylvania, Greg McGee. Greg reached out to me. He's on the coaching staff, like I said, at Howard now, football team. I said, man, I would be honest. So me and Sean were talking, and I can't wait to see these young people. And it just reminds me, I said, man, so I know you want to take them to Howard in part because Howard Hospital sits on the footprint of the old Griffith Stadium where the Homestead Grays played. And they're going to the Nats game. There's a statue of Josh Gibson down there. Sean almost coaxed me, man, if I didn't have something else tomorrow that I can't move. He said, we're going to go to the Nats game, man. You can go. I said, I ain't been in that stadium since they let Dusty Baker go. Did him dirty. He said, I understand, brother. But I don't know, man. I wish I could move this thing because I want to, the idea that young people can come into a space that isn't owned by us, but that has a gesture toward a memory of something that was owned by us. And that, of course, was Andrew Rube Foster in the Negro Leagues. And that Josh Gibson's great-grandson could be anchoring a foundation that is opening to young people. He said it's overwhelmingly Black kids, but it's not just Black kids. There's some other kids who will come with us too. This is open to everybody, but our people coming through that. Josh Gibson, one of the greatest athletes to ever play professional baseball. Rube Foster, the genius mind behind the Negro Leagues. As we restore our memory, we remember that we have the resources to build the institutions we want and that we need. And if we look back to the time when we were prevented from joining other spaces, one of the unalloyed benefits, and I say that without any hesitation, benefits of those periods was that we saw within ourselves the genius to do what we needed to do. And one of the unalloyed detriments for a man who began his baseball career, his father was a great baseball player. This man began his baseball career with the Birmingham Black Barons of the Negro Leagues, Willie Howard Mays. And of course, the Indianapolis Clowns was his friend, perhaps the greatest player to ever play the game, the great Henry Aaron with the Indianapolis Clowns, Negro League players who rewrote the record books. I think Knarrative in Nubia, the space that we have here, is a throwback to that memory. And when you played that man and said, I have my name, but they beat the language out of my mouth and he wept. That should be enough motivation for us to remember that that's how you heal a broken heart. You not only remember, you do something about it. And that's what we're doing here. And I'm grateful to you, Prof, and to everyone here, the thousands who are here in the Nubia side. I see all these people here. Look, I got to go back and read everything now. They be having, we be having whole, look, yeah, and the laughs, the jokes. I see Marlon in here and Kim, and I see Karen, everybody in here, Nitra. These are the folks. Look, I'm just naming people. It's 2,000 people in here. I can't. Oh, man. Anyway.
And another 1,000, 1,300 on the YouTube
side.
Okay. You know.
It doesn't get any better than that. I mean, it often gets better, but
yeah.
Can you imagine, Prof? Several thousand people. Now and then every day your classroom of the air. I mean, it can't even track that. You know what I'm saying?
No, but we can, because when we show up, we show up. So we know we're everywhere. I just wanted to say one more thing about the power of Nubian narrative. In your inspiration, I wanted to, just like playing that indigenous man, want to, do some icon symbols. So I started a project a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And then I ran into a brick wall, realizing that I didn't know enough to do, or did I have the authority? So I went to try to find scholars. So, we have Tasha, the linguist, the great linguist. So I was like, can you help me find someone who is an expert in icon symbols and language? And so she brought me a scholar, and I met with this woman this week. And I just want to say this to tell you how crucial this work is. As I was, laying out what it is I want to do, she said, my grandmother could have been very helpful, but she's no longer here. And I don't, outside of, some rudimentary those I know some things, but I don't even feel comfortable. And this is a scholar.
Wow.
And I said, how much of our, those of you who travel to Ghana or Nigeria, which both countries speak English, is their natural language. If you go during the holidays, you'll see white Santa Claus, you'll see Jesus on billboards, you'll see skin bleaching ads on billboards. They're very prevalent. You'll see bleached skin, which is very prevalent. You'll see a lot of that. You'll see young girls in Catholic school like uniforms, and you'll understand the power of that indigenous man crying about having his language snatched from his tongue. But it's so much deeper when you think about 300, 400, 500 years of that here, enslavement, and then the colonization of so many of our traditions just gone to the point that people don't know the richest lands started in Africa, that the biggest civilization. Somebody said, what do Black people actually have to offer society? And I'm like, everything. But that sounds so crazy to somebody who has been so misinformed over generations to believe that everything started with you.
It could be recovered, though. I mean, enough of it to, and you're doing it. Those anchor symbols will do it.
That's what I'm saying. So, even that has been a journey that has taken several years now to even get to a place, and I said, I could do what others have done, which is put out books and then claim that I know. And then that becomes the standard, right? And that becomes the authority. 100 years from now, who would know the difference?
Who would know the difference? But you know what? We would know. We would have to know. Yeah, we
not if we've all had our memories erased and now everything's digital. Who would know? 100 years from now. Right now we hold up who? Skip Gates is the authority on history, and he's an English major. He's got an English PhD. What are we doing?
The thing I love, one of the things I love about Henry Louis Gates, one of the things I love about Skip Gates is that Gates is smart. He sees where this is going.
No doubt.
So now he's going to talk to people. It's like what Asa Hilliard said before he passed. He said, Skip Gates running around West Africa in that Harvard t-shirt, busting up in Timbuktu saying, show me the books. And the librarian showed him some books. He had Timbuktu. And then when he left, Asa said, I was there a couple of weeks after, and they brought me in the room and said, this guy's so disrespectful. Here, what? These are the children who are going to be responsible for the books. We didn't even show him that because you came in here wrong. You came in here. Running around.
Here's the problem, though. Who knows that?
Well, this is the us.
But in this society, he's the authority.
Well, and that's fine because
you see what I'm saying? He's the one with the TV show, the books. There's not all the funding for foundation, everything. Who knows that?
But we know it we know this.
But it doesn't matter if we close our eyes.
That's right. No, you're right. But see the thing,
and Burns, Skip Gates, those going to be the authorities. You understand? So like we have to. So part of it, and I'm saying this passionately because I see the urgency because I've seen enough to know how this goes. And if somebody doesn't do it, it's not going to get done. And I'm not even like qualified, which is what I realized. I'm like, I'm not qualified to do this. Help, which is why we built this thing. There's so many people who are qualified. I am not. I'm just a conduit. I will put the damn thing in where it needs to be. But I don't have the.
That's the qualification. I mean, that's one of the you look. We wouldn't be here other than that qualification. This is the gift. You were called. What I'm saying, like Bob, you called for such a time as this. You said I put the elements together. In other words, we're here, thousands of people, and then thousands more because, and it's not even critical mass yet. But Gates, sure, you can start, you can fund. I was telling at the ASCAT conference last week when I didn't get my talk. You know, I said everybody got podcasts, everybody got YouTube, everybody got a Club Shay Shay. I said, here's the biggest public intellectual in America right now, in Black America. His name is Shannon Sharp. That's beautiful. Now, and then I said, now here Lewis Gates. He got Spotify money. Nicole got Spotify money. That can't just because they flood the zone. Like when the sister said, I wish my grandmother could have helped. Guess what? I was 2 weeks ago, I was talking with Dean Rashad. We were up there because she's working on this Music of the African Diaspora course for the fall. Felicia Rashad trying to pull this thing together.
She was leaving.
She's leaving as dean.
Okay. Oh,
but she's still getting Toni Morrison chair. I mean, she's still. So we talking. You know, it's fascinating, right? And she was like, Dr. Carr, you know, the connections we have about, you know, and it's so funny. I laugh every time I see it. You know, people think if you see Felicia Rashad in the movie on TV, that's her in real life. I mean, it's not like she changed all of it. No, it's the same kind of. She, as you know, I didn't know that till you know. She said, you know, the connections between women in South Carolina. I saw you like that movie, The Language You Crying. She said, do you know that movie? I said, yes. I mean, that whole thing where these sisters, these Gullah Geechee women were singing this song, and then they take one of them sisters to West Africa, and she sings the song, and these elder women in the village is like, we know that song. I mean, it's still there. Her grandmother could have helped you, but there are other grandmothers who can help. But they couldn't know each other if a place hadn't been built. That's what's the shit that happens every day in Nubia. I mean, we're talking, all the pieces are coming together. Oh, I know this. So this is my friend, or this is my brother, or this is my sister. More time is all we need.
And to that point, most of us are in our little, you know, our little cliques.
Yes.
So, and in your clique, you think you know everything. Oh. Right. So everybody in your clique, they're the only people that know things. So we couldn't even imagine. This is the beauty of Nubia. You know, you'll have, I pulled a clip from Maya Angelou, who didn't graduate from college, you know, but was teaching at the graduate level. And it was an amazing, you know, conversation that she had because she made herself into by the study. And we have placed, as we go into graduation season, you know, people on these pedestals based on what school they went to or what degrees they have, as if that's everything. But the real is, you know, on Mondays, the people that come in, I can't remember who, the young lady that came in and said, you know, she didn't graduate and she comes from you know, I'm not an intellectual. I'm like, yeah, but you're here. Yes. Reading these same books, having these, like, just because you don't have the paperwork doesn't mean that your brain isn't functioning. And we have to encourage that too. So I love what you're saying, because I know for a fact there's somebody who may not have, you know, gotten a PhD in linguistics, whatever that means, but who could absolutely add to this. And we need to, this is why we need the community. We need to do this. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I'm encouraged. Absolutely. And I can't wait to finish what we're doing too, because this is it's a long journey, but it has to be done for this very reason. So thank you for saying yes to everything.
No, thank you.
I'll be asking a lot, Dr. Carr.
No, you don't.
I do. I'll be asking.
No, you don't. No, you don't. No, you don't. School is out. The school will be out. I'm turning these final grades in this week, and then we fly.
Okay, let's get busy.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Love everybody.
Love everybody.
Thank you so much. And let me just, for those who came in late, I want to
please
play this brother again. Let me see if I can find it. I'm gonna play this one. I was gonna play Maya, but let's bring him back in because I just think it's powerful. Love you, Dr. Carr.
Love you too, Prof. Hunter. Love everybody.
All right.
Oh wow.
Someday somebody will hear me. My name is Andrew Windy Boy. I'm a Chippewa Cree. I did 2 boarding schools, one in Wapton Indian School in Wapton, North Dakota. There's Flandreau Indian School in Flandreau, South Dakota. Mid-60s to early 70s took me to the boarding school where I wasn't allowed to talk my native tongue or practice my native ways. They took me away from all of that and used me for talking that. It was my first language. I didn't know any other language. So whenever I talk, it came out. Cree would come out, and whenever I talk, I get hit. I got hit so much I lost my tongue. I lost my native tongue. The only thing I remember was my Indian name, which is Xenukihu, means old man eagle. That's the only Cree I knew. I hope